Reflections on life in general. 1. Human life is fleeting, so we should use our short time on this earth to bring some benefit to ourselves and others. 2. As humans, we all possess the same potential within us, except in some cases where certain mental functions do not operate normally. The greatest thing about the brain is its ability to develop the willpower to help each individual shape their future, provided that this ability is used wisely. If we use this remarkable mind to do harmful things, it will only lead to disaster. 3. Humans are the most evolved beings on this planet. Not only do we have the ability to bring happiness to our own lives, but we can also help others. We have a natural creative potential, and it is very important that we recognize this. 4. Paradoxically, we cannot do anything that benefits only ourselves without also benefiting others. The reason is that, whether we like it or not, we are all interdependent. It is inconceivable that we could create happiness solely for ourselves. Focusing only on oneself ultimately brings more suffering to oneself. In contrast, those who consistently care and sacrifice for others often discover that this is also a way of caring for themselves. Therefore, even if you insist on being selfish, be intelligently selfish, help others. 5. We rarely distinguish between what is essential and what is secondary. Throughout life, we run back and forth seeking pleasures, yet we only encounter troubles instead of happiness. We do anything to gain more or protect what we have, but these things are fleeting and do not bring true happiness. 6. Our minds are filled with anger, jealousy, and other negative emotions, yet we do not realize that these emotions cannot coexist with inner peace and joy. Intelligence is a precious asset of humans, but unfortunately, it can also lead to greed and selfishness, causing suffering, which we then blame on others. 7. Use your intelligence consciously, otherwise how can you claim to be superior to animals? If you truly want to find meaning in life and happiness, start by thinking healthily. Cultivate the human qualities that we all have. These qualities are temporarily buried under mistaken thoughts and negative emotions. 9. Cultivate love and compassion as they give true meaning to life. Everything else is secondary. This is the religion I promote, even more than Buddhism. This religion is simple, its place of worship is in your heart, and its doctrine is love and compassion. Its ethics are to love and respect others, whoever they may be. Whether we are secular or spiritual practitioners, we cannot choose but to survive in this world. 10. Be kind, honest, think positively, forgive those who have wronged you, treat everyone as a friend, help those in pain, but never consider yourself superior to others. Even though these pieces of advice may seem simple, try them out and see if they bring you some happiness. 11. It does not take deep contemplation to realize that all beings seek happiness and fear suffering. You will not find any being, even insects, that does not do everything possible to avoid suffering and feel safe. For humans, this is even more so because we have the additional ability to think. Therefore, my first piece of advice is to use this thinking ability well. 12. Pleasure or pain relates to the senses and our inner satisfaction. For us, inner satisfaction is far more important. This satisfaction is unique to humans. Indeed, except for a few rare cases, animals do not possess this ability. 13. The most essential form of satisfaction is peace. This sense of peace arises from acts of generosity, kindness, and what I call moral behavior, which respects the right of others to happiness. Most of our suffering arises because we think too much, and unfortunately, these thoughts are often unhealthy. We only care about immediate gratifications without considering their long-term benefits or harms to ourselves and others. This attitude always backfires. It is clear and evident that simply changing our perspective on things can significantly reduce current difficulties and prevent future ones. Some sufferings, such as birth, aging, illness, and death, are unavoidable. The only thing we can do is lessen the fear they create within us. However, many other sufferings, from marital disputes to devastating wars, can be avoided simply by adopting healthy behaviors. 16. Without careful thought, with a narrow vision and shallow behavior, especially without looking at things with an open and relaxed mind, we turn trivial difficulties into unsolvable problems. In other words, most sufferings are self-created. This is another important reminder I want to give. Reflections on youth. 17. In the schools of our exiled community or during visits to various places in India and other countries, I always feel joyful when interacting with young people. Indeed, youth are very direct and honest, with a more open and flexible mind compared to adults. Whenever I see a child, I deeply think of them as my own child, or at least an old friend whom I am responsible for caring for with all my love. 18. The most important thing for us is to provide young people with a broad education that not only expands their knowledge, but also develops basic human qualities. The foundation of human life is established in childhood. The way of thinking learned during these essential early years will have profound impacts, influencing our entire existence, similar to how nutrition and hygiene affect our future health. 19. If you do not strive to learn while you are young, it will be difficult to make up for that loss later in life. This happened to me. When I was young, there were times I was negligent, not paying attention to what I was learning and not putting in enough effort. Later, I always regretted it. I often think about how, during those years, I lost something. Based on these experiences, I advise young people to value the time they have for learning, as it is extremely important for their future existence. 20. From a young age, we should learn to unite and support each other. It is true that we cannot avoid all disputes and minor conflicts, but the important thing is to clean up those things, never holding on to any resentment. 21. Sometimes people think that children do not care about serious issues such as death. However, whenever I listen to their questions, I realize they often think about major issues, especially what happens after this life. 22. Childhood is when intelligence is developing and the mind is filled with all sorts of questions. This intense desire for understanding is the foundation for growth. The more we care about the world and want to understand why and how things are the way they are, the clearer our knowledge becomes, and our creative abilities also develop further. 23. In today's advanced societies, people tend not to pay much attention to what I call natural human qualities: kindness, compassion, cooperation, the ability to forgive. Young people easily come together smiling and making friends with each other without questioning each other's occupation or race. What matters is that others are human beings like themselves, and that is enough to form a bond. 24. As people get older, they tend to downplay the importance of affection, friendship, and support. They focus more on others' race, religion, and country of origin before getting to know them. People often turn away from what is essential and only look at what is superficial. 25. Therefore, I urge those aged 15 and 16 not to lose the pure spirit of youth, but to cherish it. Regularly reflect on human inner qualities. From this reflection, build an unshakable confidence in your true nature, finding self-confidence within yourself. It is crucial to realize in time that human life is not easy. If we want that life to be smooth and not despair when difficulties arise, the most important thing is to build inner strength. 26. Nowadays, individualism and the right of everyone to think freely, without considering whether their thoughts align with societal and traditional values, are overly glorified. In truth, this is beneficial. However, many people rely solely on external information through mass media, especially television. These sources become the standards for our understanding and our only source of inspiration. This excessive dependence prevents us from standing firmly on our own, relying on our own qualities, and it makes us lose confidence in our true nature. 27. Self-confidence and standing on one's own, in my opinion, are essential for success in life. I do not mean blind self-confidence, but rather an awareness of the inner potential within ourselves, a clear recognition of the ability to change and improve ourselves to become more profound without losing anything permanently. 28. The media often selects sensational topics like theft, murder, actions driven by greed and hatred. However, this does not mean there is nothing noble in this world, or that no actions come from human qualities. Are there not people who selflessly care for the sick, orphans, the elderly, or the disabled, or those who sacrifice out of love for others? There are indeed many such people, but we have become so accustomed to seeing this as normal that we overlook it. I believe that from the deepest parts of our nature, no one likes murder, rape, lying, or other negative actions, and we all possess the ability to love and show compassion. Just look at yourself to understand how natural love, such as maternal love, has played a significant role in your survival from birth. Without that love, we would not be alive today. If you look at yourself, you will see how happy you feel when others love you or when you express love towards others. Conversely, when overwhelmed by anger and hatred, you cannot avoid feeling uneasy. 30. It is clear that loving thoughts and actions bring beneficial effects to both mental and physical health. These thoughts and actions align with our true nature. In contrast, violent, cruel, and hateful actions cause unexpected and unforeseen consequences. This is why we need to discuss these matters, and indeed, the press often puts such stories on the front page. The problem is that these images gradually deceive us, making us believe that human nature consists only of such negativity, and eventually we might think that there is no hope for humanity's future. 31. I believe it is crucial to encourage young people to recognize the natural human qualities within themselves. Place strong faith in these qualities to understand that you must stand firmly on your own feet. 32. Some young people enter life without knowing what they want. They choose a profession, find it unsatisfactory, switch to another, and again find it unsuitable, and finally give up, thinking that nothing suits them. If you find yourself in this situation, understand that no life is without difficulties. Do not expect everything to succeed automatically and for all difficulties to disappear like magic. 33. After completing your studies, choose a profession to make a living. Choose one that suits your nature, knowledge, abilities, and desires, or according to your family's wishes. Consider the professions of those around you who can guide you. Weigh all criteria and imagine all conditions suitable for your circumstances before deciding. Once chosen, do not change again. Overcome any difficulties you encounter. Trust yourself and use all your willpower. 34. If you think that jobs are like dishes laid out for you to sample one after another, you will not succeed. Remember that one day you will have to decide, and in this world, nothing is absolutely without any drawbacks. 35. Sometimes I think we behave like overly pampered children. During childhood, we completely depend on our parents. At school, we are educated. We have food and clothing, all provided by others. When we are capable of shouldering our own life responsibilities, we still think that everything will continue to be as smooth as before. This way of thinking is unrealistic. In this world, all beings, without exception, face difficulties. Reflections on adulthood. 36. The profession we engage in not only serves as a means to make a living, but also as a way to contribute to the society on which we still depend. Moreover, society and we create a mutual interaction. If society prospers, we benefit. If society weakens, we will inevitably face hardships. Looking more broadly, our collective, the society in which we live, continues to affect other societies and ultimately all of humanity. 37. If the people in the region where we live are prosperous, that prosperity will certainly create favorable impacts, affecting the entire country. For instance, France's economy influences all of Europe and then the world. Today's advanced societies are closely interconnected, and each person's behavior influences the collective behavior of everyone else. I think it is extremely important to be aware of this. 38. When society is good, we all benefit. I do not mean that we should sacrifice personal convenience for the collective, but rather that both individual and collective well-being are interdependent. Nowadays, people tend to think that society's fate and individual fate are separate, and that individual fate is more important than the collective. However, if we broaden our perspective, we will see that this attitude has no real meaning in the long run. Our fate is intertwined with society's survival and vice versa. 39. Human happiness or unhappiness is not necessarily related only to sensory satisfaction, but is particularly related to mental constructs. Never forget this. Even if you have a beautiful house, luxurious decorations, a luxury car in the garage, plenty of money in the bank, a high social position, and the respect of others, there is no guarantee that you will be happy. Even if you become a billionaire, happiness does not automatically come to you. There is no certainty in that. 40. The deep pleasure of looking at a painting or listening to a piece of music plays an important role for humans. reflecting inner satisfaction, which is different from the crude pleasures arising from the senses or material possessions. Nonetheless, this satisfaction largely depends on the perception of hearing and sight, so it is temporary, essentially not entirely different from the pleasure derived from drugs. When you leave the museum or concert hall, the artistic pleasure ends, giving way to other cravings related to other pleasures. This is why people never find true happiness within themselves. 41. What is most important is inner satisfaction, but that does not mean rejecting the most basic conveniences. We all have the right to enjoy minimal comforts. We need and should be assured of these. Therefore, if protests are necessary, then protest. If strikes are necessary, then strike. However, understand that extremism is not permissible. If you have not found satisfaction from within and continue to demand more, you will never find happiness and will always feel something is lacking. 42. Inner happiness does not depend on material circumstances or sensory satisfaction. Happiness originates from within your own mind. It is absolutely essential to recognize the importance of this inner happiness. Reflections on old age, 43. As you grow older, even if you do not have any religious faith, you should have some understanding of the inevitable sufferings, such as birth, aging, sickness, and death, which are integral parts of life. Having been born, we cannot avoid aging and dying. Therefore, there is no benefit in questioning why these things are so irrational and why they cannot be different. 44. In Buddhism, living a long life is attributed to the merits one has accumulated previously. Even if you are not a Buddhist, you should think of those who passed away young and feel fortunate for having lived longer. 45. If, in the earlier stages of your life, you fulfilled your duties, contributed to society, and did many beneficial things with honesty, then today you have nothing to regret. 46. If you have religious faith, pray or reflect according to your beliefs. If you still retain your mental clarity, you should also consider that birth, aging, sickness, and death are all parts of human life, and no one can avoid them. Understanding and fully accepting this truth will help you live more peacefully in your old age. 47. I am about to turn 67. If occasionally and from deep within, I do not accept that my body has aged through these many years, it would be very difficult for me to accept my current situation. Similarly, once you are older, do not deceive yourself, but understand what your aging truly means to find ways to gain victory over it. 48. Ask yourself what you have done for society when you still rely on it. With the knowledge you have gained throughout your life, you should be more useful than those who were not as fortunate to live as long. Share your life story with your family and those around you, sharing your experiences. If you enjoy being close to your grandchildren, impart your knowledge to them while taking care of them. This also contributes to their education. Above all, do not imitate other elderly people who spend their days complaining and quarreling. Do not waste your energy in this way. Not only will no one like you, but your old age will also become a burden for you. Reflections on men and women, 49. There are, of course, certain physical differences between men and women. These differences lead to some emotional differences as well. However, fundamentally, the thoughts, feelings, and other characteristics related to human nature are entirely similar between men and women. Men are more suited for work requiring physical strength, while women excel in tasks requiring clear and quick thinking. In areas where deep contemplation plays a leading role, men and women are equal. 50. There is no fundamental difference between men and women. Therefore, it is evident that both should have equal rights, and any form of gender discrimination is unacceptable. Furthermore, men need women and women need men. Wherever women's rights are oppressed, they must fight for their rights, and men must support them. I have personally stood up for the rights of Indian women, advocating for their right to attend school, pursue education until successful, and be entrusted with roles equal to men. 51. In Buddhism, both men and women possess the same nature, known as the Buddha nature or the potential for enlightenment. Therefore, they are entirely equal. 52. Gender discrimination still occurs in some religious traditions. However, this is a result of societal and cultural traditions. It does not mean that women are inferior. At that time, most monastics were men, So pointing out these flaws was only to warn monks against lusting after women's bodies. Of course, a nun must also view men's bodies from these perspectives. 53. At the highest levels of practice in Vajrayana Buddhism, not only does gender discrimination disappear, but the feminine aspect is considered to play an extremely crucial role. Disparaging women is seen as a violation of the precepts. Reflections on family life. 54. The family is the most fundamental unit of society. If a family atmosphere is peaceful and kind, parents, children, grandchildren, and even future generations will enjoy happiness and a harmonious life. If parents have religious faith, their children will also be interested in religion. If parents speak politely, uphold ethics, love and respect each other, help those in difficulty, and show concern for everyone around them, their children are likely to emulate them and behave responsibly. Conversely, if parents are in constant conflict, frequently insult each other, act on every whim, and lack mutual respect, they will not find happiness, and their children will suffer the consequences. 55. As a Buddhist, I often tell Tibetans that if there is one place where they should strive to promote the Buddhist teachings, it is within the family. It is an environment where parents must express their faith to influence their children, and also where they must transform themselves to become spiritual guides. Parents should not merely display images and tell their children that this is a saint named this or that, but should explain thoroughly. This saint represents compassion, this saint represents supreme wisdom, and so on. If parents accurately understand the Buddha's teachings, their understanding will naturally have a positive influence on their children. This holds true for other beliefs and religions as well. 56. This family will continue to influence other families, which will influence even more families, spreading from tens to hundreds to thousands, ultimately creating a healthier society. 57. In modern societies, some people believe that no one respects anything anymore, thinking that only those living in less industrialized nations retain conscious behavior. However, we should be cautious with this viewpoint. In many remote areas of the Himalayas in India, for instance, modern industry is almost non-existent, yet theft and murder are rare, and people are content with what they have. Moreover, in some places, people still leave their doors unlocked when they go out, allowing guests to have a place to stay, cook, and rest while waiting for them to return. In contrast, in large cities like Delhi, crime is rampant, and people are never satisfied with their fate, leading to numerous complex problems. However, I believe that deciding not to develop economically and to revert to backwardness based on these observations would be another mistake. 58. The apparent docility and respect for others observed in traditional societies often stem from a desire for peace or a temporary resignation when they have no concept of alternative lifestyles. Ask the Tibetan nomads if they want to avoid the cold of winter, find warmth without smoke-blackened tents and belongings, receive medical care when sick, and watch television to see what is happening at the ends of the earth. I can assure you of their answer. 59. Economic and technological progress is necessary and essential. This progress relies on many complex factors often beyond our control. It is naive to think that halting all progress would solve all difficulties at once. However, it is also clear that no reckless measures should be taken. Any solution must be accompanied by ethical values. As humans, we must accept that responsibility, striving for both material development and spiritual progress. This is the key to a stable future. A society that achieves a balance between material and spiritual progress is more likely to find true happiness. 60. The family must play a crucial role. If a family radiates true peace and embodies genuine moral values, lives uprightly and altruistically, then it will form the foundation for a healthy society. I believe that the family bears an enormous responsibility. 61. The most essential aspect is that children must truly develop, meaning they should cultivate fundamental human qualities, develop noble behavior, foster a strong spirit of cooperation, and recognize their connection to the world around them. This way they become role models for others. Such children can later fulfill their duties excellently and teach future generations. Even in old age, despite becoming elderly professors with thick glasses, they will retain the wonderful habits of their youth. I have great confidence in this. 62. If a family wants to achieve this ideal, both men and women should not be attracted merely by physical beauty, voice, or appearance, but should genuinely strive to understand each other. When both discover each other's qualities and feel mutual love, that love will be accompanied by respect and admiration, increasing the chances of a happy and lasting married life. 63. Conversely, if a couple lives together solely for pleasure, driven by sexual desire, it is not much different from how prostitutes behave. They do not care about each other's character and lack mutual respect, loving each other only as long as desire drives them. However, when there is nothing new to excite each other, and love is no longer paired with deep respect, it will be difficult to live happily together. Such love is blind, and everything will eventually turn around. If they have children, those children will never know what affection is. It is crucial that everyone understands these points before deciding to live with another person. 64. Once, in San Francisco, I met a Christian marriage counselor who advised young people to make many friends of the opposite sex before choosing a partner. Do not decide immediately after the first meeting, as it could be a mistake. I find this advice very reasonable. 65. Understand that after marriage, one person becomes two. Even when single, what you think in the evening can change by the morning. When you are two people, disagreements in views can occur anytime. If either person clings to their own way of thinking without considering the other's perspective, married life will not be smooth. 66. From the moment you live with another person, treat them with all your affection and always consider their viewpoint. Whatever happens, each person must take responsibility. Married life is not a matter for one person alone. 67. The husband must pamper the wife, and the wife must pamper the husband. If either fails to meet the other's expectations, it will lead to discord and separation. If they have no children, it is not a disaster. They go to court, fill out forms, and the cost is just some paper and ink. However, if they have children, those children will be haunted by a sense of sorrow throughout their lives. 68. Many couples divorce, sometimes for good reasons. However, I believe it is better to first try everything possible to continue living together happily. This requires effort and thought. If separation is unavoidable, both parties should maintain peace and not cause further pain. 69. If you want to live with another person, be sincere and not hasty. Once you live together, be aware of your duties in married life. Family is a serious matter. Do everything possible to bring happiness to the shared life, provide for the family, and ensure the children's future. 70. Quality is more important than quantity. This principle applies to any situation in life. In a monastery, even a few serious monks are better. In schools, it is not the number of students that matters, but their discipline and decency. In a family, it is not the number of children, but their health and proper upbringing that are most important. Reflections on single life. There are various circumstances of singlehood. Some monastics voluntarily practice celibacy, while some lay people remain uninterested in marriage. Many choose singlehood willingly, while others find themselves in this situation against their wishes. Some people find happiness in singlehood, while others suffer in it. 72. Married life has its benefits but also brings many challenges. For instance, one must devote time to caring for a spouse and children if they have them, stay by their side, spend more money, work harder, and socialize with other families, among other things. 73. Those who live alone often lead simpler lives, with only one stomach to fill, fewer responsibilities, and complete freedom to do as they please. If they wish to explore or follow a spiritual path, they are entirely free to do so, and can go wherever they want to seek knowledge or enlightenment. They need only a small bag, and they can stay as long or as short as they wish in any place they like. Single life can be a favorable choice, allowing one to achieve their goals more effectively and freely. 74. Some men are forced to remain single because they cannot find a wife, while some women long desperately for a partner but cannot find one. These unfortunate situations often arise because individuals focus too much on themselves and have excessive expectations of others. If one adopts an opposite attitude, opening their heart to others and paying less attention to their own difficulties, they will naturally attract more positive responses from others. Reflections on collective life. 75. In my view, collective life is best when it is based on voluntary participation. This type of life is inherently valuable because humans by nature are interdependent. We need each other. Living collectively is akin to being part of a large family, which can meet our needs. 76. When one decides to join a community or organization, it indicates that they recognize certain qualities in that organization. Everyone lives and works together. Daily, each person manages their tasks while benefiting from the efforts of others. I find this to be a very practical solution. 77. In any organization, opposing viewpoints often arise. I see this as a positive aspect. The more differing perspectives there are, the more opportunities we have to learn from the unique insights of others, which can enhance our own understanding. If we insist on competing and arguing with those who think differently, things will take a different turn. Instead of clinging to our own ideas, we should engage in open dialogue with others. This way we can compare contrasting views and reach a new enriched understanding. 78. Whether in the family or in society, it is crucial to communicate with one another. From a young age, when arguments occur, we must avoid negative thoughts such as, "What should I do to defeat this person?" Even if we do not go so far as to ask ourselves how we can cooperate with them, we should at least listen to what they have to say. We should practice reacting in this manner. In schools and families, when conflicts arise, we should immediately come together to discuss and think through the issue collectively. 79. We often view dissent as conflict, and if it is a conflict, we believe it can only end with a winner and a loser, or as they say, when someone's pride is crushed. We should not see everything through this lens, but rather strive to reach consensus. The most important thing is to immediately consider the other person's viewpoint. It is clear that all of us are capable of doing this. Reflections on a prosperous life. Whenever I meet wealthy individuals, I often tell them that according to the Buddhist teachings, wealth is a good sign. It is the result of one's merits from the past, indicating that one was generous. However, wealth does not equate to happiness. If it did, then the wealthier one becomes, the happier they would be, which is not always the case. 81. Wealthy people are still just people, fundamentally no different from others. Despite having immense wealth, a wealthy person cannot eat more than others because they only have one stomach. They cannot wear more rings than they have fingers. Sure, they can drink expensive wines and eat gourmet foods, but that often leads to health issues. Many wealthy people do not engage in physical labor, so they need to exercise to burn off excess energy to avoid obesity and illnesses. Even I, because I do not have much time to walk, have to use an exercise bike at home. In this light, what good is wealth if it leads to such circumstances? 82. Indeed, thinking I am a wealthy person can provide a sense of excitement and project a fascinating image of oneself in society. However, is it worth enduring all the stress and tension caused by the pursuit of wealth? This often results in distancing oneself from family and society, generating envy and resentment, leading to a life filled with anxiety and defensiveness. 83. In my opinion, the only beneficial aspect of wealth is the ability to help others. Wealthy individuals hold a more significant position in society than others and can thus exert more influence. If they are kind-hearted, they can do more good than others. Conversely, if they lack compassion, they can also cause more harm. I often remind people that we have a responsibility to our planet. If you can, thanks to your wealth, do something beneficial, then do it. Otherwise, you are just being negligent. 84. Daily we are nourished by food grown by others and enjoy conveniences created by others. Once we are well off, we should help the rest of the world. There is nothing sadder than living in luxury without contributing to the happiness of those less fortunate. 85. Many people live in extreme poverty, some without enough to eat, without a roof over their heads, let alone medical care or education. If you are wealthy and only think of yourself, what do the poor think of you? There are those who work from morning till night and still do not have enough to eat. How do they feel when they see others living lavishly without lifting a finger? Are we not fostering envy and resentment in them? We should not push them deeper into hatred and violence. 86. If you have substantial wealth, the noblest way to spend it is to help the poor. who endure so much suffering. On a broader scale, this assistance also creates opportunities for those living with us on this planet to overcome difficulties and find happiness. Helping the poor is not just about giving them money, it means creating conditions for them to get an education, healthcare, and means to earn a living. 87. Living in luxury for oneself is of no benefit. It is merely a waste of money on unnecessary luxuries. Use that wealth to help others. If you find pleasure in flaunting your wealth or gambling extravagantly, even if that money is your own and its wastefulness does not harm anyone, it is still a way of deceiving yourself and squandering your existence. 88. No matter how wealthy you are, remember that you are still a human being, fundamentally no different from the poor. You still need inner happiness, which cannot be bought with money. 89. Today, the gap between the rich and the poor continues to widen. In the past 20 years, at least 500 more billionaires have emerged. Back in 1982, there were no more than 12. Among these new billionaires, over 100 are Asian. It is often believed that Asia is poor, but today, Europe and America also have numerous people in need. This contradicts the usual perception of the East-West economic disparity. 90. Grand ideologies like communism have failed to force the wealthy to donate their riches to the collective. Today, people are self-aware and understand the need to share. However, this requires a profound change in human character, necessitating a different kind of education. 91. If the wealthy continue to ignore the world's decline, it will not benefit them in the long run. They will have to constantly defend themselves against the resentment of the poor, living in increasing fear. This is already the reality in some countries. In societies where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, violence, crime, and civil unrest are inevitable. Agitators will easily incite the poor to rebel by convincing them that the rebellion is for their own good, leading to chaos. 92. If you are wealthy but also use your wealth to help the poor around you, providing them with healthcare, education, and opportunities to develop their skills, they will not forget your kindness. Even if you are rich, you can still be friends with them. If they are happy, you will share in that happiness. Do you not believe it? When you face difficulties, they will sympathize with you. Conversely, if you hide behind your selfishness and do not share, the poor will hate you and rejoice in your suffering. We are social beings. Living in a friendly atmosphere makes us feel more secure and happy. Reflections on living in poverty. 93. Material deprivation is not an obstacle that can hinder the cultivation of noble thoughts. Indeed, such nobility is far more valuable than wealth. Therefore, when one possesses a human brain and body, regardless of poverty, one still enjoys the essential elements of being human. There is no reason to despair or feel inferior. 94. I often tell those from lower castes in India who stand up for their rights that we are all human beings with equal potential. There's no reason to be discouraged just because they are poor or looked down upon by other castes. 95. Feeling bitter and resentful towards the wealthy is not beneficial. While the rich should respect the poor, if they abuse their power, the poor must protect themselves. Harboring envy and desire will lead nowhere. To become wealthy, one must strive to learn according to one's capabilities instead of just waiting patiently. The important thing is to create favorable conditions to stand on one's own 2 feet. 96. I always think of the thousands of Tibetans who fled to India upon learning that I was taking refuge there. They left everything behind, including their homeland. Most had no money, no basic amenities, and no means for minimal health care. Despite the extremely difficult circumstances, sheltering in tents, they rebuilt their lives from scratch. They cleared the forests allotted to them, with hundreds succumbing to diseases unknown in Tibet. However, few felt despair and they overcame difficulties remarkably quickly, rediscovering joy in their new lives. This demonstrates that with good habits, one can find happiness even in adversity. Conversely, if inner peace is lacking, we might deceive ourselves into thinking that comfort and wealth will bring happiness. 97. Of course, everyone has the right to add internal poverty to their material poverty. However, it is better to adopt a positive attitude. Nevertheless, I must reiterate that this does not mean one can escape poverty without effort. If you are a victim of injustice, you must fight for your rights and ensure that truth prevails. This is crucial. In democratic countries, the law applies equally to everyone, which is a great advantage. In any case, always maintain honesty and kindness. Reflections on illness. Today, medicine has made significant progress. However, in the realm of prevention and even treatment, mental strength still plays a crucial role. This is quite evident. The body and mind are closely related and interact with each other. Therefore, no matter how serious your illness is, do not despair. Always remind yourself that there is always a remedy. 99. No matter how your condition changes, you must understand that panicking will not solve anything and will only add more suffering to your pain. I often remind people of the practical advice from the Indian sage Shantideva. If there is a solution, why worry? Just apply the solution. If there is no solution, then worrying is useless and will only make the pain more acute. 100. Prevention is the most effective treatment. This prevention is related to diet and daily habits. Many people abuse alcohol and tobacco, thus ruining their health for a little temporary pleasure from the taste and stimulation these substances provide. Others overeat and become ill. I know many monks who, while living in seclusion in remote huts, have good health. However, when they return to visit family or friends during the New Year or festivals, they cannot restrain their overeating and fall ill. 101. Buddha told the monks that not eating enough would weaken the body, which is a mistake, but he also added that living in luxury would deplete one's merits. This is how he advised us to reduce our cravings and be content with what we have, helping us progress quickly on the path of practice and bringing good health. Overeating or undereating both cause illness. In daily life, it is better to avoid all forms of excess. Reflections on the disabled and their caregivers. 102. If unfortunately your body is disabled, remind yourself that within you are still a human being like everyone else. Although you may not be able to use some sensory organs, your mind still functions normally like everyone else. Do not despair. Cultivate self-confidence. As a human being, you naturally have the ability to do something meaningful with your life. I once visited a school for the deaf. At first glance, these children could not communicate like us. However, they use other means to learn just like everyone else. Today, the blind can read and write with the help of a machine. Some have become writers. I have seen on Indian television a person who lost both arms but can write with his feet. Although he writes slowly, his handwriting is very clear. 103. No matter what happens, never despair. A person who constantly tells themselves, "I will succeed," will achieve their goal. If you think, "That is difficult to do. I am not as capable as I used to be. I will never accomplish that," it is evident that you will fail. There is a Tibetan proverb that says, "You cannot escape poverty by letting go." 104. When a child is born with a congenital defect, it goes without saying that parents and others in the family cannot avoid moments of sorrow, anxiety, and despair. However, from another perspective, caring for others is a profound source of happiness and fulfillment. Buddhist scriptures advise us to love and care for those who are suffering and unable to care for themselves. The more we dedicate ourselves to helping those in such situations, the deeper we will feel a sense of fulfillment and recognize our usefulness. 105. Generally, helping others is the noblest act. If within your family right next to you, there is someone who is completely alone, neglected, or has an incurable disability, consider this an extraordinary opportunity to care for them with overflowing joy in your heart. This is an opportunity to do something truly wonderful. Reflections on the dying and their surroundings. 106. The moment of death is crucial, so it is essential to prepare for it. Understand that death is inevitable. Accept it as an integral part of life. If life has a beginning, it must also have an end. Trying to avoid this truth is futile. If this way of thinking deeply roots itself in our contemplation, when death approaches, it will not appear as a sudden or abnormal event. This realization will provide us with the strength to face it differently. 107. Indeed, most of us find the thought of our own death terrifying. We spend much of our lives accumulating wealth and planning grand projects as if we will live forever, without a hint of belief that one day, perhaps tomorrow or in a moment, we might pass away and leave everything behind. 108. According to Buddhism, it is extremely important to practice how to die well from now on. When the functions of life cease, the coarse levels of consciousness also dissipate, and a subtle form of awareness, no longer dependent on physical support, emerges, providing a unique opportunity for those advanced in their practice to achieve enlightenment. Therefore, Buddhist scriptures, especially tantric texts, often describe many meditation methods to prepare for death. 109. If you are a believer, when death is near, recall your faith and pray. If you believe in God, think that while it is deeply sorrowful that life ends, God must have a profound reason beyond our understanding. This way of thinking will surely help you. 110. If you are a Buddhist and believe in reincarnation, then death is merely a change of the outer shell, like changing clothes when the old ones are worn out. When the physical carrier, due to internal and external causes, can no longer sustain life, it is time to relinquish it for a new one. Death is not a permanent end but occurs through the pull of conditions and circumstances. When discussing the transient nature of all phenomena, it must be understood that there are two levels of impermanence. The first level is gross and easily observed, such as the end of life or any event. However, the impermanence mentioned in the Four Noble Truths is much subtler, highlighting the temporary nature of existence. 112. Meditating on the gross levels of impermanence helps us realize the preciousness of our current existence, leading us to overly cling to the brief time we have left. Only when we let go of this attachment can we appreciate the importance of preparing for future lives. 113. For those with faith, whether they accept or reject the concept of reincarnation, when sudden death occurs, the most important thing is to end the thoughts arising from gross consciousness by clearly recalling their faith in God or any positive mental state. It is best to maintain as clear a mind as possible, eliminating anything that could cloud the mind. However, if the dying person is in extreme pain and cannot maintain a favorable mental attitude, it is better not to let them die fully conscious. In such cases, using sedatives or sleeping pills is a good solution. 114. For those who do not believe in any religion or follow any spiritual path, meaning their thinking is separate from religious views of the world, the most important thing in their final moments is to remain calm, relaxed, and clearly understand that death is a natural process, part of life. 115. When caring for a dying person, consider their personality and illness, and whether they have any religious beliefs, such as belief in reincarnation. Avoid using euthanasia methods at all costs. Try to help the dying person relax by creating a peaceful atmosphere around them. If you panic, the mind of the dying person will be disturbed by various thoughts, causing them anxiety. According to Buddhism, this creates negative mental tendencies for the dying person. 116. If the dying person shares the same religion as you, remind them of the practices they are familiar with. If they do not share your faith, help them recall their own beliefs. At the moment of death, the mind often loses clarity, so it is useless to introduce a new or unfamiliar practice. Only the power of prior practice and positive thoughts at the time of death can help. 117. When a person falls into a coma, their breathing continues, but thoughts cease. If there is no way to bring the person's consciousness back, continue to support them in that state. If the family is wealthy and loves the person enough to do everything to prolong their life, it is very important to try, even if it extends life by only a day. Although it may not benefit the dying person, it can fulfill the wishes of their loved ones. When there is no hope of restoring consciousness and efforts are too costly, causing the family hardship, it is better to say goodbye. 118. From a Buddhist perspective, do everything possible to relieve the dying person's pain. However, the person cannot avoid the pain they have caused themselves. In other words, the pain results from their actions, karma, and its inevitable consequences. Worse still, if they are in an unfavorable material environment or born in a form without care, the situation would be more dire. Therefore, while surrounded by caring people, endure the pain with the body you have. Reflections on employment and lack of leisure. 119. I have a few words for some of my friends who are slaves to money. They never seem to know what it means to rest, constantly rushing about, utterly exhausted. Sometimes they travel to Japan, America, or Korea, not daring to take a single day off. Of course, if living this way is to benefit others or to develop the country, we would be delighted. Those who harbor noble ambitions and work tirelessly to achieve them are indeed worthy of our admiration. However, even in such cases, I think they should sometimes rest a bit to maintain their health. Pursuing a good cause in the long run, even at a moderate pace, is still better than exerting extraordinary effort that is only temporary. 120. However, if this intense activity is merely to satisfy personal ambition, and in the end, if this lifestyle leaves you exhausted and your health deteriorates, it is simply a way to destroy yourself needlessly. Reflections on prisons and prisoners. 121. Generally, those who commit crimes are imprisoned and isolated from society. They are viewed as undesirable elements that society no longer wants to see. They are given no hope of becoming better individuals or starting a new life. In prison, they often exhibit violent behavior towards other inmates and oppress the weaker ones. In such an environment, they have no chance to reform themselves. 122. Sometimes, I think about how a general who kills thousands is celebrated as a hero. People regard the killing as a remarkable achievement and praise it endlessly. However, if a desperate person commits murder, they are deemed an undeniable criminal, imprisoned, or even sentenced to death. 23. Some individuals amass enormous wealth without facing prosecution. Meanwhile, others in desperate circumstances steal a small amount and are handcuffed and jailed. 24. Indeed, we all have within us the potential to become wrongdoers. Those we imprison are not inherently worse than any of us. They simply could not resist ignorance, craving, and anger, ailments we all suffer from, albeit to varying degrees. Our duty is to help them heal from these afflictions. 125. Society, through its role, does not have the right to discard anyone who has committed a crime. They are fully human in every sense and part of society just like each of us. They deserve the chance to change and improve. We must absolutely restore their hope and desire to follow a different path in life. 126. I had the opportunity to visit Delhi's Tihar jail in India, where a female police officer treated the inmates with great kindness. She taught them many principles similar to those of a religious doctrine. She instructed them in meditation to foster deep inner peace, helping them overcome feelings of guilt. The inmates were delighted to see someone care for and love them. Over time, even before their release, they felt more content and confident in their human values, which would help them reintegrate into society. For me, this police officer's behavior was exemplary. Number 127. Juvenile delinquency is truly unfortunate. Firstly, these young lives are ruined just as they are starting. Secondly, this tragedy occurs due to their lack of life experience in a challenging social environment where they have yet to learn how to stand on their own. The primary advice I want to give to young offenders and all who are incarcerated is never to lose hope or faith in their ability to become better. They should tell themselves, I acknowledge my wrongdoing, but I will reform myself and do what is right to become a useful person. We all have the potential to improve ourselves. We have similar brains and equal potential. We must never say there is no hope left for us, except when we are still dominated by ignorance and temporary thoughts. 129. Pity those who are imprisoned. They commit wrongs because they are momentarily overpowered by negative emotions, and then society abandons them, leaving them with nothing to dream of in this life. Reflections on homosexuality. Many people ask me what I think about homosexuality. For those with religious faith, it is better to follow the tenets and practices prescribed by that faith. Some Christians believe that homosexuality is a grave error, while others do not hold this view. Some Buddhists accept homosexuality, while others believe that engaging in such behavior means one is no longer a Buddhist. The core texts of Buddhist teachings mention 10 harmful actions to avoid, one of which is sexual misconduct. This encompasses adultery, homosexuality, oral and anal intercourse, and masturbation. However, committing these actions does not mean one ceases to be a Buddhist. Aside from holding erroneous views, such as denying the existence of the Buddha or the law of cause and effect, none of these 10 actions, including murder, can strip one of their Buddhist identity. 131. If you do not follow any religion and prefer consensual sexual relations with someone of the same sex, without coercion or abuse, and if you find nonviolent pleasure in such consensual acts, then I have nothing further to say. Moreover, I believe, and this is very important, that it is grossly unjust to marginalize, punish, or terminate the employment of homosexuals. They should not be treated as criminals. 132. In my view, within Buddhism generally, homosexuality might be considered a mistake against certain precepts. However, in itself, homosexuality is not a harmful act, unlike rape, murder, or actions causing suffering to others. The same applies to masturbation, which harms no one. Therefore, there is no reason to discriminate against or marginalize homosexuals in society. Additionally, I must emphasize that it is not entirely fair to mechanically criticize religions that prohibit certain sexual behaviors simply because those behaviors do not align with one's own views and practices. Before condemning a precept, one should first try to understand the genuine reasons behind its establishment. Reflections on politics. 133. Politicians often make various promises to garner votes and attract voters. I will do this, I will achieve that, and you will see what I can accomplish. However, I believe that if they wish to be admired and respected by voters, they should be honest and express their beliefs sincerely. 134. If they exploit opportunities to speak deceitfully, people will eventually see through it and remember their inconsistency. One day they say this, the next day something else. What is the truth? Honesty is a crucial quality, especially in these times when the media closely monitors what prominent figures say and do. This situation requires even greater caution than before, compelling politicians to express their beliefs sincerely, regardless of the circumstances. 135. By consistently speaking honestly, those who admire one's ideas will respect and support them. Conversely, if one only adapts to the situation, making promises to the media and then ignoring them once elected, it is a grave miscalculation. Such behavior is not only unethical but also foolish. In the next election, the results will likely be contrary to one's desires. Resorting to various tricks to win just one election is not worthwhile. Once involved in government, one must exercise extreme caution, not only in actions but also in thoughts. Being a president, minister, or holding any significant position brings prestige, respect, and influence. Therefore, to avoid losing the meaning of one's mission, it is essential to be mindful of one's thoughts and motivations. The more external protection one has, the more vigilant one must be with their own mind. 137. Some individuals maintain pure intentions before being elected. However, once in power, they become complacent and forget their original goals. They consider themselves good people, holding important positions, always fighting for their constituents. To compensate for their responsibilities, they believe they have the right to do as they please, without anyone's criticism. Even in cases of regrettable actions, they dismiss them as insignificant compared to their dedication. However, this attitude leads to self-corruption. When holding power or any significant position, one must be doubly vigilant. 138. Nowadays, few people trust politicians anymore. It is a sad reality. They believe politics is dirty. In truth, nothing is inherently dirty. It is people who make it so. Similarly, one cannot claim that religion is inherently evil. It is only a few corrupt religious figures who abuse the faith of others, distorting religion. Politics, too, becomes dirty when politicians lack ethics. In such situations, everyone suffers because society needs them. In democratic countries, a multi-party system is crucial, with some parties in power and others in opposition, helping politicians and their parties earn respect. No. 139. To justify the corruption of politicians, one could simply state that they are products of society. In a society where people only think about money and power, disregarding ethics, it is no surprise to see widespread political corruption. This explains why politicians should not be solely blamed for such a situation. Reflections on justice. 140. Living in a society naturally requires adherence to certain rules. Those who make mistakes or commit wrongdoings will be punished, while those who behave correctly will be loved by everyone. The law and its enforcers are elements that ensure the smooth operation of society. However, if those entrusted with upholding the law to protect justice and people's property are not honest, the functioning of society will be riddled with injustice. Doesn't this often happen in some countries, where the rich and powerful are never prosecuted, and even if taken to court they easily win their cases, while the poor face severe penalties? It is truly sad. 141. Just yesterday, someone told me that in the United States, judges are divided into two factions. One allows abortion, and the other strictly forbids it without any concession. However, the reality is more complex, with many cases of abortion due to serious reasons, such as the mother's life being at risk. In such cases, one must choose between the life of the mother and the fetus. Yet there are also unjustified cases of abortion, such as wanting to maintain the ability to go on vacation or not having enough money to buy new furniture. The difference between these two cases of abortion is quite clear. However, from the perspective of judges in America, there seems to be no difference between these cases. Therefore, this issue needs careful consideration to determine which cases permit or prohibit abortion. 142. Recently in Argentina, a judge asked me what I thought about the death penalty as a means of reinforcing justice. For me, the death penalty is unacceptable for many reasons. I sincerely hope that this sentence will be abolished worldwide. Sentencing someone to death is an extremely serious action. It deprives the condemned of the opportunity for remorse. Even though they committed a crime, they are still a sentient being like any other, meaning they can become better depending on their circumstances. For you and me as well, certain situations might make us worse than that. So, let's give the condemned a chance. They should not be viewed as permanently evil individuals to be eliminated at any cost. 143. When the body is ill, we treat it, we don't destroy it. So why don't we treat the ailing members of society instead of just trying to eliminate them? 144. I once raised the following concern with a judge. If two people commit the same crime and both are sentenced to life imprisonment, one is single and the other has young children to care for alone because their mother has died. If this person is imprisoned, who will care for the children? What do you think? The judge replied that according to the law, both must receive the same sentence. Society must take responsibility for caring for the children. I couldn't help but think that in terms of wrongdoing, both should indeed receive the same sentence. But considering their circumstances, the sentence reveals a stark difference. Punishing the father also cruelly punishes the children, who did nothing wrong. The judge responded that the law does not provide a solution for such cases. Reflections on the future of the world. 145. Many intellectuals, religious figures, and most scientists have become aware of several pressing global issues today. Environmental degradation, wars, poverty, the suffering of many peoples, and the widening gap between rich and poor among nations. However, the problem is that while these figures make observations, they often leave action to a few rare organizations. In reality, the responsibility lies with all of us. I believe that democracy, at the very least, should function this way. According to each person's capacity, we must all cooperate and discuss together to analyze and understand these difficulties, urge those in power to act sooner and more decisively, and firmly denounce poor governance policies, raising our voices before the United Nations and the governments of the concerned nations. This is how we can create effective impacts. Number 146. Some people see me as a prophet. However, the words I speak simply represent the countless individuals living in misery due to poverty, war, arms trading, people who cannot raise their voices. I am just a spokesperson. I have no ambitions for power, nor do I intend to confront the rest of the world. Reflections on education. 147. I believe that the progress or decline of humanity largely depends on those who hold educational responsibilities, especially teachers in schools. Therefore, their mission is exceedingly heavy. 148. If you are an educator, strive not only to impart knowledge to your students, but also to awaken their awareness of fundamental human qualities, such as kindness, compassion, the ability to forgive, and the spirit of cooperation. Do not present these qualities merely as long-standing moral traditions or religious principles. Explain to them that these human traits are simply essential for bringing happiness and ensuring the survival of the world. 149. Teach students to resolve conflicts non-violently through dialogue. Help them understand that whenever there is a disagreement, the first step should be to understand the other person's perspective. Encourage them not to judge everything from a narrow viewpoint. They should not only think about themselves, their society, their country, or their race, but should be aware that everyone has equal rights and needs. Train them to recognize their responsibility towards the world and explain that everything they do impacts the rest of the world. 150. Do not only explain these values verbally, set an example for students to follow. Concrete examples leave a deeper impression in their minds than words alone. Show them that you are responsible for their future in every aspect. Reflections on science and technology. 151. Innovations in certain fields of science and technology may not always have broad impacts. However, discoveries in specialized areas like genetics and nuclear physics can lead to highly beneficial applications, but also pose tremendous risks. I hope that scientists in these fields recognize their responsibility and do not turn a blind eye to potential disasters stemming from their research outcomes. 152. Researchers often have a narrow focus. They may not consider placing their work within a broader context. This is not to say they lack goodwill, but rather that they are so engrossed in their specific research areas that they cannot contemplate the long-term consequences of their discoveries. I greatly admire Einstein for raising awareness about the dangers of nuclear energy research. 153. Scientists must always ensure that their research does not cause harm. This concern is particularly relevant to genetic research, which could lead to perilous deviations. For instance, the prospect of cloning beings for the purpose of producing spare parts for humans is horrifying to me. Furthermore, I denounce the use of human embryos in research. As a Buddhist, I cannot accept vivisection or cruel treatment of any living being, even for research purposes. Why should all living beings not have the right to avoid suffering, while only humans claim that right exclusively for themselves? Reflections on trade and business. 154. To business people, whether male or female, I often say that the spirit of competition in itself is not bad when one thinks, I want to strive to reach the pinnacle of development, just like others. However, if one seeks to become a leader by engaging in vile tactics to undermine the success of others, such as deceit, slander, or even extreme measures like eliminating competitors, this is completely unacceptable. 155. It is essential to understand that those who compete with us are humans like ourselves, possessing the same rights and privileges. Consider the harmful effects of envy, as previously mentioned, and recognize that competitors are also part of society. Their success is ultimately beneficial for the collective good. 156. The only acceptable form of struggle is self-confidence in one's abilities and enthusiasm for one's work. This mindset should be based on the belief, I feel capable of achieving this just like anyone else, and I will succeed even if I receive no help. Reflections on writing and journalism. 157. Writers and journalists often have a profound influence on society. Human life may be short, but the words they write can have effects spanning centuries. In Buddhism, the teachings of compassion, love, and altruism from enlightened masters like the Buddha, Shantideva, and other revered teachers continue to be preserved and passed down thanks to the written word. Unfortunately, some texts have also been the cause of immense suffering, such as those promoting extremist ideologies like fascism or communism. Thus, writers have the potential to bring happiness or misfortune to millions. 158. Whenever I meet journalists, I often tell them that in our era, especially in democratic countries, their potential to influence public opinion and their responsibility towards society are immense. One of the most beneficial roles journalists can play is to fight against falsehoods and corruption. They should honestly and impartially analyze the conduct of national leaders, ministers, and other officials. I admired how President Clinton, despite leading the world's most powerful country, was brought to court just like any other citizen during his scandal. 159. It would be wonderful if journalists had a keen nose for sniffing out the activities of government officials, helping to judge whether they are worthy of the public's trust. However, while doing this, they must remain honest, transparent, and impartial. Their efforts should not be aimed at gaining victories for their factions by demeaning political opponents or rival parties. 160. Journalists should also promote and highlight fundamental human qualities. Typically, they focus on sensational news, especially horrifying events. From deep within, people find murder and other heinous crimes unacceptable, yet these stories often make the headlines. Conversely, acts of caring for children, helping the elderly, and attending to the sick are considered ordinary and not newsworthy. 161. The greatest harm caused by this situation is that society, particularly the youth, gradually sees murder, rape, and other forms of violence as natural aspects of life. This perception may lead us to believe that human nature is inherently evil and that there is no means to prevent its manifestation. Consequently, we might lose hope in the future of humanity and question why we should not become terrorists if there is no hope for promoting human virtues and world peace. When helping others seems futile, we might wonder why we shouldn't live for ourselves and turn our backs on the rest of the world. Reflections on agriculture and the environment. 162. Farmers play a crucial role in protecting the environment and public health, but they can also worsen these conditions. Today, groundwater pollution, overuse of fertilizers and pesticides, and harmful farming practices designed to increase yields clearly illustrate the human responsibility for environmental degradation and the emergence of new diseases. An example is mad cow disease, which resulted from feeding cows with animal-based feed. This should be considered a criminal act, but instead, only the sick cows are being slaughtered. 163. I believe that the use of chemicals in agriculture should be significantly reduced, and farming should be more aligned with nature. This might decrease short-term profits, but will bring greater benefits in the long term. Additionally, we should reduce large-scale industrial livestock farming, which harms the environment, and instead focus on smaller-scale, more sustainable practices. Artificially produced animal feed leads to unforeseen consequences, as seen today. When considering the wasted time, money, energy, and unnecessary suffering caused by these farming practices, it becomes evident that alternative methods should be employed. 164. All living beings have the right to live. Mammals, birds, and fish feel pleasure and pain, just like us. They do not enjoy suffering. If we exploit them solely for profit, regardless of Buddhist principles, it shows a blatant disregard for basic moral values. 165. Among all living creatures on this planet, humans cause the most disruption. This is undeniable. I imagine that without humans, this planet would be a safer place, where millions of fish, chickens, and other small creatures could live peacefully and comfortably. 166. If a person shows no hesitation or compassion when torturing or killing an animal, they will likely struggle to feel compassion when mistreating their fellow humans. Ignoring the suffering of any sentient being, even if it is deemed necessary for the greater good, is always dangerous. Denying or refusing to think about these issues may ease one's conscience, but it leads to all forms of abuse and the destruction of one's own happiness. I often emphasize that compassion and kindness are sources of personal benefit. 167. Many argue that animals eat each other. While true, this behavior is simple and natural. Animals kill for food, not for profit. This contrasts sharply with humans, who kill millions of cattle, sheep, chickens, and other animals for profit. I once met a kind and intelligent Jewish man from Poland who was a vegetarian, unlike many Tibetans. He said to me, "I do not eat meat because if I did, I would need the courage to kill the animals myself. We Tibetans are different. We wait for others to kill them before we eat." Reflections on War. 168. In any society, there are always malicious elements that cause various difficulties, so effective means are needed to prevent these elements from causing harm. However, when no other solution is available, resolving issues through military force may become necessary. In my view, the use of military power should never be for expanding an ideology or invading other countries. It should be seen only as an essential solution to prevent the schemes of those who disrupt the peace and well-being of humanity. The sole acceptable purpose of war is to protect the happiness of all people, not any private interest. War should be a last resort. 169. History shows that violence begets violence, often failing to resolve difficulties and instead causing immense suffering. Violence sometimes seems like a smart and logical solution to end conflicts, but one cannot be certain that extinguishing one fire won't ignite a smoldering pile of embers. 170. Modern warfare has become cold and inhumane. Advanced weapons can kill thousands at once, yet those using them remain unaffected, without witnessing the suffering they cause. Commanders who order killings are often thousands of kilometers away from the battlefield. Innocent women and children who just want to survive are killed or maimed. It seems that people no longer regret the old forms of warfare, where lords would lead their troops into battle. Their deaths often ended hostilities. Perhaps we should at least restore the human dimension of war. No 171. Once weapons are in hand, it is difficult for people not to use them. I believe military forces should be disarmed at the national level. The entire world must be demilitarized, with only a multinational military force remaining to address any threats to global peace, wherever they may arise. 172. Everyone talks about peace, but peace cannot be achieved externally if people still harbor anger and hatred within. Moreover, one cannot harmonize the desire for peace with an arms race. Nuclear weapons are seen as a deterrent, preventing enemies from waging war, but in the long run, such threats are neither wise nor effective. 73. Some nations spend enormous amounts of money on nuclear weapons. A tremendous amount of money, energy, and talent is wasted, increasing the risk of impulsive decisions and heightening fear. 74. It is everyone's duty to strive to end war. Identifying those who instigate conflicts is not difficult, but it is hard to believe that these troublemakers appear naturally and independently decide to cause such problems. They are part of a society that includes us all. Therefore, each of us must take some responsibility. To bring peace to the world, we must first cultivate peace within ourselves. 175. Global peace can only be achieved through inner peace, which comes from recognizing that all humans are part of a shared family, regardless of differences in beliefs, ideologies, political systems, or economic systems. These differences are secondary to what brings us together. The primary point is that we are all human beings living on this tiny planet. If we want to survive, cooperation at both the individual and national levels is essential. Reflections on commitment to others. 176. The image of people dedicated to helping others in fields such as healthcare, education, spirituality, family, society, or any other area warms my heart. Any human society inherently creates various difficulties and sufferings for itself. Every effort to alleviate these difficulties and sufferings is commendable. From a Buddhist perspective, it is crucial not to view caring for someone simply as a duty to be born or a pastime, like the enjoyment of gardening. If such help is given with love, compassion, accompanied by kind words and a smile, it will undoubtedly bring true happiness to the recipient. Practically speaking, care given with love is not different from help given out of duty, but the benefits are immensely different between these two approaches. 177. If you are a doctor, you should not just treat patients mechanically or out of obligation. Patients may feel they are not being properly diagnosed and cared for, or that they are just experimental subjects. Some surgeons, due to overwork, see patients as machines to be fixed, losing the sense that patients are human beings. Once empathy and compassion are lost, and the awareness that the object of care as a human being is gone, the surgeon becomes someone who just cuts, stitches, or replaces body parts, akin to changing car parts or assembling wooden pieces. No 178. Whenever you care for someone, it is crucial to foster altruism. This attitude benefits not only the person being cared for, but also the caregiver. 179. The more we care about others' happiness, the more happiness we create for ourselves. However, one should never think about this while sacrificing for others. Do not expect any reward. Focus solely on their well-being. 180. Never consider yourself superior to those you help, even if they are dirty, poor, ignorant, or in tattered clothes. And even if you have to sacrifice money, time, and energy, do it with humility. Personally, whenever I encounter a beggar, I strive not to see them as inferior, but as a human being, just like myself. 181. When helping someone, do not just address their immediate needs, such as giving them some money. Instead, create conditions that enable them to solve their problems independently. Reflections on happiness. I believe that each person inherently feels a sense of self. It's challenging to explain where this feeling arises, but it's clearly present. From this sense of self emerges the desire to achieve happiness and escape suffering. This is entirely legitimate. By nature, we have the right to seek maximum happiness and avoid suffering. The entire history of humanity unfolds through this sentiment. Moreover, this feeling is not exclusive to humans. In Buddhism, even the tiniest insect has this feeling and, according to its ability, seeks maximum happiness and avoids unfavorable circumstances. 183. There are various ways to perceive happiness. Some people, with less discerning minds, indulge in a blissful state, thinking everything is wonderful. We do not focus on this kind of happiness. Some others build their happiness on material wealth and sensory satisfaction. As mentioned earlier, the transient nature of such happiness is evident. Even if one believes they have attained true and lasting happiness, when circumstances change and are no longer favorable, they will inevitably face greater suffering. However, some people find happiness through moral thoughts and actions. This is the kind of happiness we truly need because it is deeply rooted and transcends all situations. 184. If one does not act correctly, they will not find happiness, even if surrounded by close friends and in comfortable settings. Therefore, mental attitude is more crucial than external conditions. Yet it seems many people only care about external, material conditions, neglecting their mental attitudes. My advice is to pay more attention to your inner qualities. 185. To experience genuine and lasting happiness, one must first understand the reality of suffering. Initially, this awareness of suffering may lead to pessimism, but in the long run, it brings significant benefits. Many people avoid facing reality. They use drugs to create a false sense of bliss, immerse themselves in a blind spiritual state, or lead a hectic life to avoid thinking. But this is only a short-term reprieve. When difficulties resurface intensely, they become entirely helpless. And as Tibetans say, they will only know how to lament bitterly. Anger and despair will overwhelm them, adding unnecessary suffering to their existing difficulties. 186. So let's try to understand where our suffering originates. Suffering, like all other phenomena, arises from countless causes and conditions. If our perceptions were simply and truly dependent on a single specific cause, we might say that happiness, too, could arise from a single cause. We all know this is not true at all. Therefore, we must abandon the idea that suffering always has a single cause, and finding that cause will end our suffering. 187. We must acknowledge that suffering is part of existence, and in Buddhist terms, it is samsara, the endless cycle of bound existence. If we view suffering as something negative and abnormal that we are victims of, our lives will inevitably be filled with misery. Our problems arise from our reactions. Happiness can only be achieved when we can view what we consider suffering as not making us unhappy. 188. Reflecting on the reality of suffering from a Buddhist perspective does not lead to pessimism or despair. This reflection helps us uncover the fundamental causes of our misfortune, cravings, hatred, and ignorance, as well as our efforts to eliminate these things. Ignorance here means the lack of understanding of the true nature of all beings and things. This ignorance is the source that gives rise to the two toxins of craving and hatred. When ignorance dissipates, the other two toxins of craving and hatred lose their foundation, and the root of suffering dries up. What emerges is a happiness imbued with natural compassion, entirely free from all forms of negative emotions. Reflections on unhappiness. 189. It is often observed that in developed countries, many people feel unhappy. Despite lacking nothing and enjoying all the conveniences and comforts of life, they remain dissatisfied with their fate. They inflict suffering upon themselves through jealousy or by imagining any reason to be unhappy. Some are constantly obsessed with impending disasters, while others believe that the end of the world is near. They create their own suffering simply because they lack the ability to think healthily. If they could change their perspective, these tormenting feelings would immediately disappear. 190. However, many people suffer for more legitimate reasons, such as illness, poverty, being victims of natural disasters, or experiencing abuse or injustice. Yet again, it is essential to remember that they can transform their situation. If their difficulties are material, they must manage them, such as by bringing abusers to justice, seeking compensation, or working hard to overcome their poverty. On a mental level, they must cultivate a more positive outlook. 191. The level of suffering depends on one's mental attitude. For example, when ill, one should utilize all available treatment methods, consulting doctors, taking medication, and performing physical exercises. However, people often complicate things by self-tormenting and resenting their condition, thus adding mental suffering to physical pain. 192. When facing severe illness, we tend to view it negatively. For instance, if one has a headache, they might think, "Nothing could be worse than this. Wouldn't it be better if my legs were paralyzed instead?" People continuously lament and see themselves as the only ones suffering in the world instead of consoling themselves by thinking of countless others who endure similar pain. Conversely, we can adopt a different mindset. For example, if both arms are paralyzed, one might think, "Although I can't use my arms, my legs are still strong." And if both legs are paralyzed, one can think, "Even though I can't walk, I have a wheelchair, and I can still write with my hands." Simple thoughts like these can provide some comfort. 193. In any circumstance, it is possible to view the situation from a more positive perspective, especially in today's advanced era, where technological progress can offer hope. While no mental method can entirely eliminate the physical pain caused by specific conditions, it is rare to encounter situations where we can find no solace. When dealing with physical pain, focusing on positive aspects and maintaining those thoughts in our minds can somewhat alleviate the suffering. 194. No matter how prolonged and severe the illness, there is always a way to avoid being overwhelmed by despair. If you are a Buddhist, you might think, "May this illness purify the wrongdoings I have committed in the past. May the suffering of others be added to mine, so I can bear their pain." Also, think of the countless other beings suffering like you, and wish that your suffering could lessen theirs. If you lack the strength for such thoughts, at least recognize that illness affects many others, not just you. This simple realization can make enduring your pain easier. If you are a Christian and believe in a Creator, take comfort in thinking, "Though I did not wish for this suffering, there must be a reason behind it, and in His mercy, God has given me this life." If you follow no religion, understand that the misfortune you endure, no matter how severe, is not unique to you. Even if you don't believe in anything, imagine a beam of light from outside piercing your pain and dissolving it. Try this and see if it eases your pain. 195. Some misfortunes, like the sudden death of a loved one, are unavoidable and irreversible. In such cases, despair is futile and only intensifies the pain. This advice is particularly for those who do not hold any religious beliefs. 196. Analyzing your suffering is essential, as it helps identify the causes and seek ways to alleviate them. Generally, we tend to blame others or external factors for our misfortunes. However, this is not always the case. For instance, students who fail exams often refuse to accept that they would have passed if they had studied harder. We may blame a higher power for creating unfavorable circumstances, but this is just adding mental suffering to our physical or emotional pain. 197. Many conflicts occur within the larger family of humanity and within our own families, not to mention numerous conflicts between groups and nations, and within individuals themselves. All these conflicts stem from thoughts and perspectives created by our intelligence. It is unfortunate that intelligence can sometimes lead us into negative mental states. Intelligence in this context is a source of suffering. However, from another perspective, intelligence is the only means to overcome conflicts and differences. 198. Even in the case of losing a close relative, such as a parent, you should think more wisely. Remember that life will inevitably end with age. In childhood, your parents did everything they could to raise you, and now there's nothing to regret. However, if a parent dies prematurely, such as in a car accident, that is indeed a tragedy. Reflections on pessimism. 199. To those who are pessimistic and constantly torment themselves, all I can say is, you are truly foolish. Once in America, I met a woman who always felt miserable without knowing why. I told her, "Why do you make yourself so miserable? You are young, you have many years ahead to live, there is no reason to torment yourself like this." she replied, asking why I was interfering in her affairs. I felt sad and told her that expressing herself that way would bring no benefit. I gently held her hand and patted it kindly. She immediately changed her attitude. One can only help people in such situations with love and affection. That love must not be superficial or empty words, but something that comes from the depths of one's heart. While arguing, one uses reason, but when expressing true love or affection, it must be done directly. Eventually, the woman changed and began to laugh and talk naturally. 200. If you are a pessimist, remember that you are part of human society, and as a human, there's always love between people deep within. Therefore, you will always find someone among them whom you can look up to as a role model and place your hope in. Tormenting yourself as you are doing is of no use. 201. Open a new, more positive chapter in your thought process. It is a great mistake to think that everyone is bad. Of course, there are some bad people, but that does not mean everyone is bad. There are many noble and generous people. 202. Those who view the world negatively will not trust anyone, feeling lonely from within. This happens because they cannot think of others. Not being able to think of others, they judge others through their own perspective and imagine that others look at them the same way they look at others. In such a case, the feelings of loneliness within them should not come as a surprise. 2-3. Once a person with close ties to China visited Dharamsala. Many residents there who had preconceived notions about this individual created a tense atmosphere for the meeting. As for me, I had no ill will towards this person. I thought of them simply as another human being, just someone who was not well informed and thus overly trusted the Chinese. During our first meeting, the person spoke to me with a confrontational tone, but I continued to see them as just another person and spoke to them about my homeland Tibet in a friendly manner. In the next meeting, their attitude had completely changed. If I had reacted tensely to them initially, both of us would have become more entrenched in our viewpoints. I would have disregarded their arguments, and they would have done the same to mine. By seeing them as a person, I reminded myself that all humans are similar. The difference lies in being informed or not. Thus, I treated them with kindness, and gradually they became more open. Some people only see the negative aspects of everything. It is quite strange. For instance, among the Tibetan refugees, though all are in similar situations, some always remain content, sharing interesting stories that bring joy to others. In contrast, others seem never satisfied with anything, constantly highlighting the negative aspects of everything and tormenting themselves. 205. According to Buddhist scriptures, the world can appear as a friend or an enemy, filled with flaws or virtues, depending on our thoughts. Broadly speaking, nothing is entirely beneficial or entirely problematic. Everything we use or interact with, from food, clothing, and houses, to family members, friends, superiors, subordinates, teachers, or disciples, all possess both virtues and flaws. This is just how things are. To understand reality accurately, we must accept both the good and the bad as they are. 2-6. From a certain perspective, we might see everything positively on some days, even viewing suffering as useful. People who have faced many challenges in the past tend not to complain about minor difficulties. The pains they endured have strengthened their character, giving them a broader perspective, a more balanced mind, and a closer relationship with reality. This helps them see that things are just as they are. Those who have never faced hardship and have lived their lives in luxury are detached from reality. When faced with minor difficulties, they flood their surroundings with complaints. 207. I have lost my homeland and will spend the rest of my life in exile. My people have been tortured and killed, temples destroyed, culture erased, homeland devastated, and resources plundered. There is nothing joyful about that. However, I have learned a great deal from interacting with different peoples, religions, cultures, and sciences. I discovered new forms of freedom and new perspectives on the world that I had not known before. 208. Among Tibetan refugees, those who have endured significant suffering are often the most cheerful and mentally resilient. Many who spent 20 years in horrendous prison conditions have told me that, spiritually, those were the best years of their lives. A monk from my monastery who endured severe torture for years to renounce his faith managed to escape to India. I asked him if he was ever afraid while imprisoned. He answered honestly, saying that his only fear was losing compassion for his torturers. 209. People in France, Germany, the UK, and elsewhere who experienced World War II and the subsequent hardships are indifferent to minor shortages. They are content with their fate, having seen much worse. On the other hand, those who did not experience the war, living comfortably like in a kindergarten, faint or complain bitterly when faced with minor difficulties. Even if happiness comes to them, they are unaware of it. 210. Some of the newer generations no longer believe in material progress and have turned to spirituality. I find this extremely positive. Nonetheless, it is essential to understand that the world comprises both good and bad, and what we call reality is largely a mental construct. Reflections on fear, 211. Many people wake up with their minds already flooded by countless unfounded worries. These feelings stem from various causes. Some people were mistreated by their parents or siblings during childhood. Some were sexually abused. They were treated cruelly but did not dare to speak out. This fear gradually seeped into their consciousness, causing them sadness. If they can find someone close to them to confide in, and this person reassures them that those events are in the past, they can help them close that chapter of their life. In Tibet, people often say that to clear a conch shell horn, you must blow into it. When I was young, I was very afraid of dark rooms. As time passed, so did that fear. This can also happen when we interact with strangers. The more closed our minds are, the greater our fear and the less safe we feel. Conversely, the more open we are, the more comfortable we feel. This has been my personal experience. Whether interacting with a high-ranking official, a beggar, or an ordinary person, I see no difference between them. What matters most is a smile and an open, human-filled face. 213. Whenever you feel fearful because you've lost confidence and believe that everything you do will inevitably fail, take a moment to think. Ask yourself why you are accepting defeat even before you begin. You will certainly find no legitimate reason. It is your way of thinking that creates difficulties for you, but it is not because you lack capability. 214. True compassion only manifests when you realize that others have the right to happiness just like you. This compassion will help you understand your responsibility towards others. When you awaken this awareness, your self-confidence will naturally increase. This confidence will reduce fear and make your self-assurance stronger. From the outset, before tackling a challenging task, if you muster strong determination, even if you fail, you will retain the initial resolve to try again, whether it is the second or third attempt. If your purpose is clear, keep trying without retreating. 215. The most effective method to combat anxiety is to think less about yourself and more about others. When you truly perceive the difficulties of others, the significance of your own problems will diminish. When you help others, your self-confidence will grow and your inner anxieties will decrease. Of course, this help must be sincere. If done only to eliminate your own insecurities, the effect will be the opposite, causing you to withdraw further into yourself and your fears. Reflections on suicide. Discussing the topic of suicide is a delicate matter. There are many reasons that lead to the decision to take one's own life. Some people commit suicide because they are overwhelmed by feelings of sadness and anxiety, others because of despair, some due to wounded pride, when others do or do not do something to them. Some because they believe they are worthless and incapable of achieving anything. Some out of intense anger driven by an insatiable desire without a way out, and some simply because they let worries and sorrows overtake them. There are countless other reasons as well. 218. In general, suicide is a way of rejecting all future solutions that might resolve one's current difficulties. Even though one may be facing many challenges at the moment, it does not mean that a solution cannot be found one day to overcome those difficulties. 218. Most suicides occur during moments of extreme emotional intensity. As humans, we must not make such an extreme decision just because of sudden anger, desire, or anxiety. These impulsive actions can lead to mistakes. As humans, we have the capacity to think, so it is better to wait until we find calm and relaxation before making a decision, rather than acting in a way that cannot be undone. 219. My guardian, Thrijang Rinpoche, told me a story about a man from Khams who felt extremely miserable and decided to jump into the Tangpo River in Lhasa to end his life. He took a bottle of wine to drink before jumping into the water. When he set off, he was filled with various emotions and was very determined, but when he reached the riverbank, he hesitated and drank some of the wine. After a while, he still did not feel brave enough and drank some more. In the end, he returned home with an empty bottle and his decision to commit suicide abandoned. Reflections on loneliness and isolation. According to surveys, a large portion of Americans report feeling deeply unhappy due to loneliness. This survey, conducted over 2 weeks, revealed that a quarter of adults admit to feeling extremely lonely, suggesting that this feeling is incredibly common. In big cities, thousands of people walk the streets, but they don't bother to glance at each other. If 4 eyes happen to meet, they rarely greet each other with a smile, unless out of social obligation. In subway cars, they sit next to each other for hours without exchanging a word. Isn't that strange? 221. I sense that loneliness stems from 2 main causes. Firstly, we are too numerous today. When the world was less populated, people felt strongly that they belonged to a larger human family, understanding and feeling closer to each other. Even today in rural villages, people still feel this way. Villagers know each other, lend tools and machinery, or collaborate on larger projects. In the past, people gathered, called each other to church, and prayed together. They had more opportunities to meet and chat with one another. Today, the planet faces overpopulation, with millions crammed into big cities. It's not hard to see that their most significant concern is work and monthly wages. It seems everyone creates a separate life for themselves. Modern household appliances allow us to live without depending on others, giving us the false impression that everyone around us plays an increasingly secondary role in our well-being. This leads to indifference towards others and fosters feelings of loneliness within ourselves. 222. The second cause of loneliness, in my opinion, is that people today are incredibly busy. For example, when we ask someone a short question like, "How are you?" we feel like we've wasted 2 precious seconds of our lives. As soon as work ends, we bury our heads in the newspaper. Let's see if there's any news. Chatting with a friend feels like a waste of time. 223. In densely populated cities, people know many others, so they must greet and chat with numerous people. This becomes very inconvenient. Hence, people constantly avoid social interactions. If someone tries to start a conversation, we feel they're invading our private life. 224. Living in large cities often makes people feel lonely, indicating that it's not due to a lack of people to befriend, but rather a lack of warmth between people. This affects their mental health negatively. In contrast, those raised in a warm environment develop more positively and harmoniously in all aspects, from physical and mental health to social behavior. 225. Modern societies have lost all human values, turning life into a mechanical routine. Early in the morning, people go to work. After work, they seek entertainment in nightclubs or other places. They return home late, exhausted, and sleep for a few hours. The next morning, half awake, they still have to go to work. Don't city dwellers spend most of their lives in such a routine? Each person becomes a cog in the machine, whether they want to or not, joining the overall operation of the machine. Over time, life becomes exceedingly heavy, causing each person to hide behind a facade of indifference. 226. Don't exhaust yourself in the evenings. After work, go home. Eat leisurely, then enjoy a cup of tea or another drink, read a book, and create a relaxed and comfortable atmosphere before going to bed. Wake up early the next morning. If you go to work, your mind will be fresher and clearer. I guarantee your life will change drastically compared to before. 227. Everyone agrees that loneliness is neither beneficial nor enjoyable. We must find ways to combat it. But this feeling arises from many causes and conditions, so we must tackle it early, starting within the family. The family is the most basic unit of society and where we can find happiness and grow in love and affection. 228. If we harbor hatred and resentment towards others, they will likely feel the same towards us. distrust and fear will arise, creating distance between people, and you will inevitably feel lonely and isolated. Not all members of society have such negative feelings towards us. Some may view us negatively on certain days, but we must understand that we are the primary cause. 229. In the family and at school, if children are raised in a warm environment, they will grow up capable of helping others. When they meet someone, even for the first time, they will feel comfortable and not shy away from speaking. They will know how to create a refreshing atmosphere. In such an environment, loneliness rarely emerges. Reflections on anger, 230. If we let anger and hatred control us, we will never find comfort in our bodies or minds. People around us will notice immediately, and no one will want to be near us. Even animals will run away, except for lice and mosquitoes, which will cling to us to suck our blood. We won't eat well, won't sleep soundly, our stomachs will ulcerate, and if this situation persists, the remaining years of our lives will certainly be reduced. So why be angry? No matter what we do to vent our anger, we can never eliminate all our enemies. Can anyone claim to have eradicated all their enemies? As long as we continue to harbor the internal enemy within ourselves, the anger and hatred in our minds, even if we eliminate countless external enemies today, countless others will arise tomorrow. 231. The real enemies are the toxins that stir within our minds. Ignorance, hatred, desire, jealousy, pride. These are the only enemies that can destroy our happiness. More dangerous than any are anger and hatred, the root causes of countless miseries in the world, from small family quarrels to large conflicts. These miseries can turn any happy environment into an unbearable atmosphere. No religion praises such qualities. All extol love and kindness. Just reading descriptions of paradise shows that it's a place of peace and beauty, with lovely gardens full of fragrant flowers, and at least to my knowledge, no conflict or war ever occurs there. Anger is never attributed any positive qualities. 232. So how should we deal with anger? Some people believe that anger is not a flaw. Others, unfamiliar with how the mind works, think anger is a natural part of the mind and should not be suppressed but expressed. If that were true, ignorance and illiteracy would also be natural parts of the mind, since we are born without any knowledge. These are things we must strive to eliminate. No one opposes removing them by claiming they are naturally inherent and shouldn't be changed. So why not eliminate anger and hatred, which cause much greater harm, just as we eliminate ignorance and illiteracy? Clearly, we should. Learning requires patience, as we cannot understand everything at once, but can only gradually reduce our ignorance bit by bit. The same applies to anger. It is difficult to eliminate it permanently, but any reduction is beneficial. You might tell me it's your business and doesn't concern me at all. 234. Psychiatrists might advise you not to suppress feelings like anger, but to let them out. Nevertheless, they don't encourage you to seek it out and provoke it. Try to understand the harmful aspects of anger, and even if you insist it's part of your mind, that doesn't prevent you from accepting that it's better to free yourself from its grip. 235. Try to avoid situations that might trigger violent reactions. However, if such situations arise despite your efforts, don't let them drag you into their grip. If you interact with someone skilled at provoking others, try to overlook their provocations and view them from a different angle. 236. Those we see as enemies were not born with hostile traits. They became our enemies when they began to exhibit certain thoughts or behaviors, and we immediately labeled them as such. But if their behavior completely changes, they could become our friends. It's the same person, but one day an enemy, the next day a friend. Isn't that illogical? 237. We must distinguish between an individual and their temporary attitudes. Do not oppose the person, but rather their emotions or behaviors. Avoid any desire to harm the person. Help them change and offer them the best you can. Strive to stop their hostile behavior towards you while still showing love for them. This is the way to help them cease their hostile actions and perhaps even become your friend. 238. If you cannot forgive the terrible things someone has done to you or others, oppose the action but not the person. Avoid being driven by the urge to retaliate or seek revenge. This is true patience. It is very difficult to react appropriately while in the grip of extreme anger. So just let go of your anger. Recently in Jerusalem, I participated in a debate between Jewish and Palestinian students. At the end of the meeting, a Palestinian student remarked that from that moment, everything would proceed peacefully. However, these were just words spoken during a discussion. In reality, things are different. If stopped by Israeli police, they would immediately get angry and see the Israelis as enemies. They wondered how to resolve this issue. They discussed and came up with the idea of seeing others as images of God. One student added, "Whenever you stand before someone who has wronged you, regardless of who they are, if you see them as images of God, your anger will vanish." Isn't that a great idea? To me, it's wonderful. 240. Someone wrote to me saying that every time they meditate, an image of the Dalai Lama appears in their mind, bringing them great comfort. Nowadays, whenever they get angry, they think of me, and their anger disappears. I think that whenever sudden anger flares up in our minds, instead of focusing on the anger, we should think of someone or something we love. Our minds will calm down immediately, at least to some extent. For example, think of the man or woman you love, and your mind will shift focus. As people often say, two thoughts cannot occur simultaneously. The mind will naturally shift to the new image, which will overpower and erase the previous one. 241. I often say that if we let anger run rampant, it might not harm our enemies, but it will surely harm us. We lose inner peace, fail to accomplish anything worthwhile, suffer from indigestion, lose sleep, drive away guests, and look at anyone who dares cross our path with angry eyes. If we have a pet, we forget to feed it. We create a heavy, unbearable atmosphere for our family. Our closest friends avoid us. Those who once cared for us gradually drift away, and we become increasingly isolated. Reflections on restraining desires. 242. The purpose of desire is to seek satisfaction. However, when desire takes control and we constantly demand more, we will never achieve satisfaction. Instead of finding happiness, we will face suffering. Today, sexual freedom is often highly valued. But if we let sexual desire run rampant solely to seek pleasure, not only will we fail to find lasting contentment, but we will also create numerous negative consequences, such as the pain of abandoned spouses, broken families, disrupted lives of children, sexually transmitted diseases, AIDS, and other miseries far outweighing the brief pleasure we might attain. 243. The nature of desire is to grow increasingly intense, even though we might occasionally believe we have found satisfaction. For anyone caught in the trap of desire, it is like a thirsty person drinking seawater. The more they drink, the thirstier they become. 244. Everything has its limits. While we might be able to amass wealth, one day circumstances might change and we could find ourselves unable to earn any more. This can lead to despair. Therefore, it is wise to set a reasonable limit on external conditions to prevent future disappointment. Thus, now is the time to reduce desires and become accustomed to contentment. 245. Desire is the root of all difficulties, creating an endless cycle of wants. The more we desire, the more we have to strategize and strive for satisfaction. Some time ago, a businessman told me that in his quest to expand his company, he found himself lying more and fighting harder against competitors. Eventually, he realized that fostering ever-growing desires was meaningless. He gradually scaled back his business projects, leading to less intense competition, which allowed him to conduct business more honestly. I found his reflections quite sensible. 246. I do not mean to say that commerce and business expansion are undesirable. Success in the economic field is beneficial, as it creates jobs for the unemployed. In short, it benefits not only oneself, but also others and society as a whole. If everyone chose a monastic life, relying on alms every day, the economy would collapse and everyone would starve. I believe that in such a scenario, the Buddha would tell the monks, now it's time for everyone to start working. 247. We should not develop the economy at the expense of human values. Always be honest in business and do not prioritize profit over inner peace. If we see profit as the primary goal justifying all other bad deeds, then why did we abolish slavery? I believe that lofty values are the legitimate factors that lead to progress. Reflections on jealousy and envy. 248. Envy causes us great mental distress and hinders our spiritual growth. When envy becomes excessive, it can harm others. envy is a profoundly negative emotion. 249. Jealousy is illogical. It does not prevent those we envy from earning more money or possessing more qualities than we do. It only adds to our own suffering. If jealousy becomes so intense that it drives us to destroy the success of others or ruin their assets, there is nothing more disgraceful. Clearly, such destruction will eventually come back to harm us. 250. Jealousy is utterly irrational because the well-being of society depends on all its contributing members. If some people become wealthy, society as a whole benefits, including ourselves, even if only to a certain extent. Therefore, when we see someone becoming prosperous, instead of feeling resentful, we should consider it beneficial for everyone. 251. If someone we love, or someone who depends on us, achieves great success, we should rejoice. Even if we do not fully admire them, their success benefits society, which gives us more reason to be happy. No single person can bring prosperity to an entire country alone. It requires the talent and cooperation of many. The individual we are discussing is among those capable people, so their success should be celebrated. 252. Suppose someone wealthier and smarter than us only enjoys their success alone. If we keep brooding over this and become suffocated by resentment, what good does it do? Why shouldn't others have the right to enjoy what we also desire for ourselves? 253. There is another form of jealousy that, in my opinion, might be somewhat understandable, though still a negative emotion. This is the jealousy that arises when one of two lovers is unfaithful. Imagine a couple deeply in love, married, living harmoniously, trusting each other and raising children. Then, one day, one partner takes a lover a new romantic interest. In this case, it is entirely understandable that the other partner would feel heartbroken. Reflections on pride. 254. The greatest harm caused by pride is that it hinders personal transformation. If you think, I know everything, I am truly a good person, you will no longer have any opportunity to learn anything new, which is the worst thing that can happen to you. 255. Pride also causes various social difficulties. It breeds envy, arrogance, contempt, indifference, and sometimes leads to various forms of abuse and violence against others. 256. It is important to distinguish clearly between pride and self-confidence. Self-confidence is necessary. It helps us stay resilient in the face of challenges, enabling us to say, I will have the strength to succeed. Self-confidence is different from overconfidence, which is based on a poorly reasoned assessment of our abilities or external circumstances. If you believe you have the ability to complete a task that others cannot manage, and this belief is not exaggerated or unfounded, it cannot be called arrogance. For example, if a short person tries to reach an object placed too high and a taller person steps in to help, saying, "Don't bother, I can reach it," the statement merely reflects that the taller person is better suited for the task. It does not imply that they are superior or intend to oppress others. 257. There is no justification for arrogance. It is a misjudgment of oneself or a feeling stemming from minor and temporary achievements. Always consider the negative effects of pride. Recognize your weaknesses and the limits of your abilities, understanding that fundamentally, you are not much different from those you consider inferior. Reflections on suffering. 258. Many people have experienced traumatic events in life, such as witnessing their parents or others being massacred, raped, or tortured. These scenes continue to haunt them for many years, and often they don't know who to confide in about these experiences. Helping them is not easy. The severity of these wounds and the speed of recovery depend greatly on social and cultural context. Religion also plays a significant role. I often think of the Tibetans who, through Buddhist practice, do not become too weakened by such traumatic scenes. 259. If the victim has an open-minded mentality that allows for easy forgiveness, and the perpetrators of rape, torture, and killing recognize the excesses in their actions and feel remorse, then a meeting between the two sides can bring about results. Such a meeting can help the wrongdoers see their mistakes and sincerely repent, while also providing the victims with an opportunity to release, at least to some extent, their resentment. If both sides find healing, isn't that something worth pursuing? It is not always the victims who suffer severe internal turmoil. Sometimes the perpetrators also cannot escape the deep consequences of their heinous actions. I often think of the Vietnam War veterans, many of whom are constantly haunted by the violence and cruelty they inflicted. Despite the passage of time, scenes of massacre, explosions, and decapitated bodies still appear in their nightmares, causing deep mental disturbances. 261. These individuals cannot overcome the deep mental shocks because they lack the love and compassion from those around them. The kindness, altruism, and compassion of others can alleviate their suffering, but in our modern societies, such individuals with these qualities are too rare. This is why victims often feel isolated. However, we can help them by talking to them, either in groups or individually, to ease their pain. Help them understand that they are not alone, and that many others have faced similar situations and managed to overcome their difficulties. Share your own experiences of suffering and how you have managed to overcome them. Of course, we cannot help them with mere theoretical discussions or standardized psychological formulas. We need to speak to them sincerely, from the heart. Patience is crucial, and we must be willing to sacrifice our time if necessary. A few comforting words are not enough to console someone deeply traumatized. 263. Experience shows that those who grow up in a peaceful environment and develop strong human qualities can endure pain more easily when it occurs. Conversely, those raised in a conflict-ridden and violent environment tend to have negative reactions and take longer to recover. 264. A healthy body resists disease more easily and recovers quickly. Similarly, a healthy mind helps to endure misfortunes and bad news more lightly. If the mind is weak, traumatic events will cause deeper and more prolonged shocks. However, this does not mean that we are bound to this from birth and cannot change. With proper training, we can develop good mental health. Nonetheless, education, family, society, religion, and media, among countless other factors, also play an important role. 265. If unfortunately a calamity befalls us, we should understand that worries and sorrow are additional sufferings that uselessly compound the specific sufferings we are already enduring. Speak out to those around you to dispel these feelings. Do not keep them inside out of fear or shame. Think of these misfortunes as part of the past, and carrying them into the future serves no purpose. Direct your mind towards more positive states in your existence. Furthermore, understand how suffering arises. People inflict suffering on others because they are driven by the three mental toxins: ignorance, hatred, and craving, which prevent them from controlling their minds. In fact, we all harbor these three toxins within us. Just a slight increase in their control over us can lead us to commit extreme acts. Conversely, a wrongdoer might one day control these negative emotions and become a kind person. We should not make permanent judgments about anyone. 267. Under the influence of inner tendencies and external circumstances, we can commit unimaginable acts during normal times. Driven by empty concepts such as racial discrimination or nationalism, some people, not necessarily inherently violent, can commit horrifying acts of violence and extreme cruelty. Think about this when someone wrongs you. We must accept that our suffering arises from the interplay of many factors, and thus we cannot attribute all the responsibility to one person or a single cause. We must view our suffering from a broader perspective. Reflections on shyness. 268. When meeting someone new, it's common to feel overly cautious or maintain some distance. This attitude is unreasonable. In reality, there is no reason to be afraid when interacting with others. Simply recognizing that others are human beings just like us, with similar dreams and needs, is enough to break the ice and start a conversation. 269. Whenever I meet someone for the first time, I remind myself that they are also a human being like me, with the same desires for happiness and aversion to suffering. Regardless of their age, stature, skin color, or social status, fundamentally, there is no difference between them and all of us. With this understanding, I can open my heart to welcome them as part of my family, and any feelings of shyness immediately disappear. 270. Shyness often stems from a lack of self-confidence and an excessive attachment to social customs and conventions. People hide behind the image they want to project to others, which is entirely artificial, and their natural tendencies repeatedly remind them of this stance, sometimes as if it were a command. For instance, when there is an urgent need to relieve oneself, one might act as if everything is fine for a moment, but this sense of ease cannot last indefinitely. Shyness arises from an excessive desire to protect oneself or an overly strong awareness of one's own ego. Paradoxically, the more we try to protect ourselves, the more we erode our self-confidence, making us even more timid. Conversely, the more we open our hearts to others by expressing our love and compassion, the less we are haunted by our own self and the more we can naturally develop self-confidence. Reflections on hesitation, 272. In life, we always need a minimum amount of courage to make decisions. However, decisions should not be made impulsively. A bit of hesitation is necessary to give oneself time to assess the situation more accurately or to consult with those more knowledgeable. To some extent, hesitation is indeed essential, but when faced with the pros and cons, one must have the courage to make a decision, regardless of the difficulties that may arise. I must also confess that sometimes I do not apply the advice I give to myself. In meetings with members of the Kashag, the Council of Ministers in the Tibetan government in exile, I have made decisions regarding a current issue, but after lunch, I have had second thoughts and thought, perhaps a different decision might be better. Therefore, I have nothing definitive to advise. Reflections on self-hatred. 273. Self-hatred is an extremely negative attitude. If we take a moment to delve deeper behind the outward expressions, we can see that this form of hatred is simply a result of our own egoistic thinking, where we insist on being the most perfect person at all costs. However, if the ideal image we have of ourselves is missing even the tiniest detail, we find it unbearable. This feeling is also a form of pride. 274. I was truly astonished when I first heard about the feeling of self-hatred. I wondered how one could possibly hate themselves. Everyone loves themselves, even animals. After thinking it over, I realized that it is simply an exaggerated form of self-love. One thing is certain, if we cannot be kind to ourselves, we cannot be kind to others. If we want to express our love and affection for others, to bring them happiness and help them avoid suffering, we must first cultivate feelings of kindness towards ourselves. This will allow us to understand that others have similar desires and needs, and only then can love and compassion arise within us. Therefore, as long as we hate ourselves, we will not be able to love others. Without making an effort to change this attitude, it will be extremely difficult to find peace and joy within ourselves. This will ruin our lives. Isn't that foolish? I probably shouldn't say that, but it's the truth. 276. To overcome self-hatred, we must recognize the mistaken image we have created of ourselves and cultivate a genuine and healthy self-confidence based on our human qualities. We should maintain humility and focus more on others. Reflections on alcohol and drug addiction. 277. People addicted to alcohol and drugs are often aware that these substances will ruin their lives, yet they lack the necessary inner determination to stop. This weakness, along with the fragility of the mind when faced with deep internal wounds that we have discussed earlier in point 258, may be an aspect inherent in an individual's nature. Everyone understands that drugs are harmful to health and can lead to mental confusion. Even though drugs may temporarily alleviate fears and anxieties as well as pain, they cannot make these issues disappear entirely, but merely mask them for a while. To overcome suffering, one must first recognize it, understand its nature, and identify its causes. These are tasks that the confusion induced by drugs cannot achieve. 279. In a BBC documentary, young Russians reported that the pleasure derived from drugs is far greater than that from sexual pleasure, which is often considered the most intense in humans and animals. Researchers have tried to understand the force within drugs that can overshadow the dangers they pose, and why the numbness and confusion caused by drugs can temporarily suppress our sorrows and difficulties. I often half-jokingly say that our minds are already susceptible enough to illusions. We certainly do not need to add the effects of drugs to this. 280. Education, support from those around you, and a clear awareness of the harmful consequences of drugs can help provide the strength needed to resist addiction. Instead of seeking immediate, artificial, and fleeting happiness that inevitably leads to suffering, One should cultivate inner peace and happiness that are not dependent on external circumstances and substances. As I have previously advised young people, focus on your own qualities, build trust in your inherent nature, and learn to stand firm on your own feet. Above all, focus more on others than on yourself. I believe that courage will grow in tandem with the development of altruism. Reflections on passionate love. Typically, the labels such as beautiful or ugly, good or bad that we attach to others and objects are related to the desires within ourselves. We see as beautiful what we like and as ugly what we dislike. These judgments are merely creations of our own mind. If beauty truly existed within the object itself, then all of us would be irresistibly attracted to that person or thing. Sexual desire engages all our sensory organs simultaneously, creating a powerful impact that can make our perceptions reach their peak. The passion of romantic love makes the person we are infatuated with appear flawless in every aspect, a complete and enduring perfection, worthy of our eternal love. Every small detail of the beloved radiates a wondrous aura. We cannot imagine living without that man or woman. But unfortunately, by nature, all these feelings are transient. The features we once found charming lose their allure with a single word or gesture, sometimes a trivial one. Worse still, if we discover that the person we once saw as perfect loves someone else, they instantly become utterly detestable. 283. If you find these attachments weighing you down excessively, try to look at your situation in a relaxed manner, considering all its aspects. Understand that everything has its ups and downs, including beauty and pleasure, all of which are mere mental constructs. This awareness can open up a different perspective for you. Sometimes it might be enough to simply imagine how your beloved would appear to you if you suddenly caught them betraying you or behaving in a way that completely contradicts the ideal image you have of them. 284. Distinguish between true love and attachment. True love, in its ideal form, expects nothing in return and is not dependent on external circumstances. On the other hand, attachment inevitably changes with the flow of emotions and events. 285. The love that connects two people largely depends on sexual attraction. This connection can only be genuine and lasting when the choice between the two, beyond physical attraction, is also based on understanding and mutual respect. Reflections on thoughtlessness. 286. Often we perceive reality incorrectly and express this perception with words without realizing that we are essentially lying. In Tibet, there's a story about a man who saw a very large fish. When asked about the size of the fish, he gestured with his hands to show how big it was. When asked again for the exact size, the fish's size became more modest. Just tell the truth. How big was it really? And then the fish became tiny. It wasn't that he was lying initially. He simply didn't pay enough attention to what he was saying. Surprisingly, many people speak in this manner. Tibetans are used to it. When they tell a story, they don't provide any evidence, and no one questions where these stories come from or how they reach their ears. Those who tend to speak this way should be more careful about what they say. 287. From a certain perspective, it's better not to talk too much, only speaking when there is something important to say. Language is a distinctive and wonderful feature of humans. The concepts and words we use artificially isolate things, while these things, indicated by the concepts or words, carry many different nuances, constantly changing under the influence of numerous causes and conditions. When we identify a particular nuance of reality, we simultaneously discard from our mind all other nuances of that reality and designate the object we have chosen, a particular aspect of reality we are focusing on, with a word that applies only to it and helps us recognize it. According to our habit of evaluating that object, we create another distinction associated with it. This is a good thing, this is a bad thing, and so on. But in reality, no intrinsic quality can be attributed to anything. It is merely the result of a perspective on reality, at best reflecting only a part of it, or worse, being a complete misunderstanding. No matter how rich the language is, its capacity is very limited. Only non-conceptual experiential awareness can help us perceive the true nature of all things. The delicate issues related to language can be seen in many fields, such as politics. Political agendas established by politicians are often too simplistic, while the issues they aim to address are highly complex, involving numerous factors. They act as if these issues can be resolved simply by relying on a few concepts or terms, such as Marxism, socialism, liberalism, or protectionism. In the face of a vast array of causes and conditions creating a particular situation, politicians isolate one or two causes and conditions, ignoring the rest, thus never finding a proper solution, leading to all sorts of misunderstandings. In my view, this is the root of all difficulties. Unfortunately, we have no other means than words and concepts. 289. It's best to use words only when absolutely necessary. Talking a lot without real need is like letting weeds grow all over a garden. Isn't having fewer weeds better? Reflections on gossiping. Typically, when someone criticizes me, even if they insult me, I genuinely ask them to continue doing so, but with a good intention. If you see someone making a mistake but keep praising them, saying everything is perfect, it's meaningless and doesn't help anyone. If we tell someone directly that what they are doing isn't serious but then speak ill of them behind their back, that's not right either. Say what you think to their face. Clarify what needs to be done. Distinguish between right and wrong. If there are doubts, voice them. Even if it requires a bit of firmness, say it. This approach brings clarity, and baseless gossip will be minimized. Sweet talking only fosters rumors. Personally, I prefer straightforwardness. 291. One day, someone told me, according to Mao Zedong, one must dare to think, dare to speak, and dare to act. Indeed, if you want to do or achieve something, first you must think, then have the courage to speak out your thoughts, and finally, act on what you said. If no one does anything, there will be no progress and no mistakes to correct. However, one must also ask if what they are about to say or do will bring any benefit. 292. Even if our words are spoken with the highest goodwill, if they unnecessarily hurt others, such harsh or blunt speaking will not achieve the desired results. Sometimes, the person we are conversing with might just need kind and gentle words, even if they are not entirely truthful. 293. In Hinayana Buddhism, there are 7 negative actions to avoid in terms of body and speech: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, slandering, harsh speech, and idle chatter. In contrast, Mahayana Buddhism allows for actions that may seem negative if they are necessary to protect others' well-being and are devoid of any selfish ambition. 294. Generally, I believe in always telling the truth, even if it requires using firm words, as this can be beneficial. However, one should avoid criticizing or slandering anyone in any way, especially if done with ill intent or a negative outlook on everything. Such words cause others pain and do not bring us any real joy, instead creating a stifling atmosphere. Reflections on cruelty. Sometimes out of ignorance, we cause suffering to other beings without even realizing it. Indeed, we often don't recognize that animals also feel pleasure and pain. Similarly, we rarely truly understand the suffering of others unless we experience it ourselves. It's evident, others are in pain, but we are not. Only when we think, if someone were to beat and curse me, I would suffer like this or that, do we begin to grasp the suffering of others. Some people are entirely oblivious to the pain they inflict on others. They believe the most important thing is to find a safe way to escape their own suffering. This mindset only creates more unconsciousness within them. The more pain they cause others, the more they sow the seeds of suffering for themselves. Furthermore, causing harm to society inevitably leads to double the suffering for oneself. If you happen to commit a terrible act against someone, you must feel remorse. Acknowledge the wrong you have done, but don't believe you must bear that punishment for the rest of your life and never return to a normal life. Don't forget what you have done, but don't let remorse turn into a lifetime of sorrow and despair. Indifference is not an option, it's merely ignoring the issue. Instead, forgive yourself. I made mistakes in the past, but from now on, I will ensure it doesn't happen again. As a human being, I have the capacity to free myself from the errors I've made. As long as despair continues to plague you, it means you haven't yet forgiven yourself. If you've wronged someone, try to meet them if possible. Speak to them sincerely. I acted improperly and caused much harm. Please forgive my mistakes. If they accept your apology, their resentment may ease. and in Buddhism, this is seen as a form of confession, leading to healing. 299. However, this should not become a religious concept. Simply extending a hand to someone you've hurt, acknowledging your wrongdoing, and expressing genuine remorse can alleviate their resentment. Healing can only happen if both parties approach the situation with openness. 300. I believe that the desire to harm others is not inherent but develops later. This desire is a mental construct. Initially, Hitler believed that Jews were harmful and needed to be exterminated. This thought grew, overshadowing all other thoughts and eliminating any sense of compassion. 3.1. Perceiving others as enemies stems from imagination. Buddhism sees this as an artificial construct, contrary to the natural existence of all things. When a thought arises, people immediately believe it to be true, assign it importance, and act upon it without considering the suffering it may cause others. 302. To change those who think and act recklessly, we must first awaken their deep-seated humanity and gradually separate them from their unrealistic ideologies. At the very least, we hope they will think more clearly. If no other way remains to change them, force might be necessary. However, not just any kind of force will do. Even when dealing with those who commit the most heinous crimes, we must treat them with humanity. This is the only way we might see them change one day. 303. Love is the ultimate solution to change others, even if their hearts are filled with anger and hatred. If you consistently exhibit unwavering love without wavering or tiring, they will be moved. This requires time and patience. But with pure determination, unwavering compassion, and steadfast love, you will succeed. Reflections on indifference. 304. Indifference, especially towards others, is one of the most severe mistakes. If one only thinks about oneself, ignoring what happens to fellow beings, it signifies an extremely narrow worldview, shallow understanding, and a poor inner life. 305. From the moment of conception, we are dependent on others. Our happiness, the future of the world, and all the conveniences we enjoy, from the most trivial objects to our daily survival, are the results of human effort. Prayer and other religious practices can indeed have some effect, but it is primarily human activities that have shaped this world. 306. Everything can only exist through a form of interdependence, which means the mutual connection and interaction between all phenomena. Nothing can be found that exists independently by itself. Therefore, it is unimaginable that an individual's interests could be entirely separate from the interests of others. Everything we do in each present moment creates new circumstances in the future, and these circumstances lead to further events. Whether we act intentionally or unintentionally, we become part of an endless chain of cause and effect. Similarly, the sufferings and joys we experience in the future are the results of causes and conditions created in the present. This complex chain of connections is so intricate that we cannot fully grasp it. 308. Apathy towards the well-being of others and a lack of understanding about the causes of future happiness is precisely the way we set ourselves up for future misfortune. Reflections for those with faith. 309. Believing or not believing is each person's freedom. However, once you have embraced a religion and believe in its teachings, you must respect that religion, not wavering between belief and disbelief. You should not have a careless attitude, but should act in a manner that aligns your actions with your words. 310. Some people think, if I fully devote myself to Buddhism, I must be able to live entirely and perfectly according to its ideals. Otherwise, I will abandon it. This all-or-nothing attitude is often seen in Westerners. Unfortunately, it is incredibly challenging to achieve perfection instantly. 311. Only through gradual practice can one attain the goal, and isn't that truly important? Nonetheless, you should not say, whether I practice or not makes no difference because I am worthless. Set a goal for yourself, utilize all available means to focus on that goal, and you will succeed step by step. 312. Each person has their nature and aspirations. What suits one person may not suit another. It is essential to remember this when judging other religions and spiritual paths. The diversity of beliefs relates to the complexity of human nature. Even if these beliefs are not universally accepted, many people have found and continue to find significant help through them. we should not forget this and must respect all religions as they deserve. This is extremely important. 313. All religions have their rituals, but they also encompass some fundamental aspects. For instance, in Buddhism, the primary goal of practice is to master one's mind. However, this is very difficult and requires a lot of effort and perseverance, so many people do not focus adequately on this goal and only regard it as secondary. While they place their faith in Buddhism, they cannot fully express that faith and end up engaging superficially in rituals, reciting mantras without genuine dedication. In Tibetan Buddhist rituals, instruments like drums, bells, and cymbals are often used. Participants observing this may think, these are true practitioners, but they forget that rituals are a means to turn away from the illusions of the world, to help oneself cultivate love, compassion, and enlightenment, as these are the profound practices where practitioners should invest their energy. Isn't this correct? In any case, if you do not transform yourself, how are you different from others? 314. Religion, from a certain perspective, is no different from medicines used to treat diseases. Medicines are effective when there is illness, but have no effect when one is healthy. For those whose lives are going smoothly, there is no need to flaunt these medicines, saying, this medicine is very effective, very expensive, and has an attractive color. Regardless of its appearance, the sole purpose of medicine is to treat illness. If it is not needed, there is no reason to show it off. Similarly, religion or any spiritual path is beneficial when the mind faces difficulties. Insisting on showcasing these beliefs when everything is smooth or when people remain indifferent amidst their challenges is pointless. 315. The most crucial aspect is to deeply integrate the teachings and practices you have received into your mind and apply them in your daily life. This is not something that can be achieved overnight, but only through persistent practice, little by little. Reflections for non-believers. 316. Many people do not follow any religion, and that is their right. No one has the authority to force them to change their viewpoint. What is far more important is that their lives should have some meaning, which means at the very least they should find happiness. Happiness is fine, but that happiness should not cause harm to others. If one's satisfaction is achieved at the expense of others' suffering, then sooner or later one will also suffer. 317. A human life lasts a maximum of about 100 years, which is incredibly short compared to geological epochs. In this short span, if we only create negativity, our lives will have no meaning. Everyone has the right to happiness, but no one has the right to destroy the happiness of others. The purpose of human existence is not to create suffering for others. Even if one reaches the pinnacle of knowledge or wealth, without showing respect or compassion to others, that existence is not worthy of being called a human existence. To live happily while avoiding creating any harm, that is the kind of happiness that humans are entitled to and should strive for. 319. For most of us, happiness is based on the amount of material wealth we possess. However, it is clear that these things cannot bring us true satisfaction. Just look at those around us. Many live in comfort and plenty, but need tranquilizers or drown their sorrows in alcohol. Conversely, many who have nothing are genuinely happy, serene, healthy, and live longer. We must not forget that the most important satisfaction is not the crude and immediate gratification brought about by the senses, but the inner satisfaction within our hearts. Therefore, kindness and helping others can reduce desires and help us be content with our lot. It is not necessary to follow a religion to achieve this. I mention this not to please any deity or ensure a better rebirth, but to say that anyone seeking inner peace cannot do without this. 321. As the economy and technology develop, we increasingly depend on each other. Everything we do affects the rest of the world, sooner or later, and the general condition of the world will in turn impact the happiness and suffering of each individual. Unlike in the past, today we cannot view things narrowly or rely on a single factor or cause. In modern times, when facing any situation, we must analyze all its diverse aspects. 322. I do not mean we should sacrifice our happiness for the sake of others, but to emphasize that the happiness of both ourselves and others is closely connected. If we feel responsible for the peace and happiness of all people on earth, we should start viewing everything with a broader perspective, recognizing each individual's contribution through their behavior. 303. There are 6 billion people on Earth. Most of these 6 billion focus solely on material comforts, showing no concern for religion or spiritual life. In summary, non-believers make up the majority of humanity, so their thoughts and actions play a crucial role in the world's progress. Fortunately, one does not need to follow any religion to practice kindness, as just being human is enough. 324. The same applies to animals. Those that tend to live in groups often attract others, while aggressive ones make others avoid them. Aggressive dogs, for example, will cause other dogs, even larger ones, to keep their distance. This principle also applies to humans. Those who master their minds, think kindly, and speak gently naturally have more friends. Being around them brings a sense of peace, even for animals. Their presence creates a pleasant atmosphere, making no one want to leave. 325. Conversely, if one's mind is uncontrollable, speech aggressive, and actions violent, others will avoid them and feel uncomfortable in their presence. People will not listen to what they say, turn away when they try to start a conversation. How can one enjoy camaraderie and fun if this is the case? 326. Despite the large number of people on Earth, each of us often sees only ourselves. Yet we should not forget that we rely on others for food, clothing, social status, fame, but still consider those closely related to us as enemies. Isn't this a strange paradox? 327. Simply caring about others, either internally or through outward actions, can make us feel happy and at ease in this life, without mentioning the potential impact on future lives. It also means that when we face difficulties, many will visit and help us, and even our enemies might become friends. If we think only of ourselves and see others as competitors, we will inevitably create all sorts of unnecessary problems for ourselves. In today's advanced world, even if life seems impossible without competition, we can still do better than others without crushing them. Reflections on monastic life and monks. 328. Most monastics renounce family life. Many religions value the celibate life of monks for various reasons. In Buddhism, to achieve enlightenment, one must first eliminate mental toxins, starting with the most coarse ones. The most dangerous toxin is craving, which binds us to the cycle of samsara, the continuous cycle of birth and rebirth. Understanding the 12 links of dependent origination, which bind us to samsara, helps us see that if the impact of craving ceases, past karma will no longer produce results. 329. Among all cravings, sexual craving is the strongest because it involves all 5 senses: form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. Therefore, to tackle craving, one must first address the most intense craving, then gradually the more coarse, and finally the subtle ones. Reducing craving and developing contentment helps one progress more easily on the path of non-attachment. This is the Buddhist perspective. Other religious traditions have their explanations. 330. Practically, monastic life or celibacy frees one from many worldly attachments. Monks and nuns who have renounced worldly life no longer care about public opinion. Their clothing is simple and their material needs are minimal. 331. Once married, one inevitably faces social obligations. A family requires more spending than a single life. The more one spends, the more one must work, plan, and manage everything. The more work and planning, the more likely one is to encounter opposing forces and possibly engage in harmful actions. The transition from family life to monastic life allows Christian monks and nuns to pray, read, and meditate 5 to 6 times a day, almost entirely detached from secular activities. The switch from family life to monastic life brings many benefits. 332. At the end of life, those who have renounced worldly life will find peace. Others will worry. How will my children manage? Who will take them to school? Who will support them? How will my wife cope? If I'm not there, how will my elderly husband manage? Surely my young wife will live with another man. These are not the concerns one should have at the end of life. In many countries, the man is the pillar of the family. If he dies, how will the wife survive? If there are children, it becomes a disaster. 333. Before marriage, one worries about finding a spouse. But after marriage, the worries don't end. The man wonders if his wife will still listen to him. The wife wonders if she will still please her husband. It's complicated. 334. Weddings are expensive. The ceremony must be grand. In India, people set aside a large part of their assets, saving to the point of skimping on food. After marriage, they may struggle with infertility, or, if they don't want children, face unwanted pregnancies and abortions. Wouldn't it be easier to avoid these worries? Monks and nuns might sometimes wonder if a marital life would suit them better, but understanding that overcoming this thought brings peace is essential. Celibate life is undoubtedly purer. 335. Some may think my view is selfish. I'm not sure that's the case. Married people think only of themselves, not for the benefit of others. Even if they aim for that, they often fail. In contrast, those who choose celibacy, like Christian monks and nuns, dedicate their lives entirely to helping others, such as caring for the sick. I think of Mother Teresa, who had no husband, no children, no family, and dedicated her life to caring for the poor. With a family, everything would be much harder. Despite her determination, she would have had to manage household chores, take her children to school, and so on. 336. In running our exiled government, if we need to send a monk on a mission somewhere, they are always ready. Even if they have to go to another country, there are no obstacles. If they need to be called back, they return immediately. Asking this of a businessman would be much more complicated. They might respond, "The store just opened. I need to stay and oversee it. I must decline." 337. Let me mention those who teach others. Tsongkhapa said that one should not try to transform others before transforming oneself. For example, when teaching about the harms of anger, one must not be angry. When teaching about reducing cravings, one must maintain that reduction in the face of one's desires. 338. A Lama I know wrote to me that in Nepal, over 30 years, Tibetans have built many monasteries with luxurious temples and expensive statues, but they have not built a single school or hospital. I am sure Christian monks would not do that. Young lamas dress in robes by day, but don formal attire at night to attend secular parties, behaving like important figures or wealthy businessmen. I wonder if the Buddha ever acted this way. It is clear, the Buddha emphasized humility and dedication, but we do not concern ourselves with these virtues. I believe this should be exposed by the press as hypocrisy. This is something we need to address first. The Buddha taught that we should teach others according to their needs, and that our teachings should align with our own practices. Therefore, we must follow the precepts ourselves before teaching others. Reflections on meditators. 340. Similar to other religions, Buddhism has teachings based on rational understanding and logical reasoning, transmitted from teacher to disciple. However, meditators, through their lived experiences, have validated the value of these rational teachings. Though not numerous, these meditators have triumphantly upheld the banner of glory in the field of practice. By cultivating mental tranquility and profound insight, they have achieved deep meditative experiences and internal transformations, bringing life to theoretical understandings that might otherwise remain abstract and mythical. I do not hesitate to praise them. Reflections on faith. Indeed, without a doubt, faith plays a crucial role in all religions. However, faith must be driven by legitimate reasons. Nagarjuna, the renowned Indian philosopher of the 2nd century, stated that understanding and faith must go hand in hand. For Buddhism, faith is considered the source of noble rebirth, and understanding is the source of enlightenment. Yet, Nagarjuna emphasized that faith must be born from clear understanding, meaning one must know why they believe. In Buddhism, faith develops through 3 stages, corresponding to 3 different levels: inspiration, desire, and conviction. Faith at the level of inspiration expresses admiration that one feels after reading a valuable book, meeting a person with extraordinary abilities, or hearing about the Buddha. Faith at the level of desire represents an aspiration to rise above oneself, achieving deep understanding and insight, to become like the person one admires. These types of faith are not very stable, as they are not based on concrete understanding. In contrast, faith in the form of conviction is strengthened by a clear understanding that what one desires can indeed become a reality. This type of faith is based on reason. Scriptures tell us that the Buddha advised his disciples not to believe blindly in his words, but to verify them, similarly to how a goldsmith tests gold by cutting, burning, and stretching it. 343 Devotion can sometimes be very fleeting unless firmly rooted. In Tibet and some other countries, some practitioners develop intense devotion to their teacher. However, if this teacher suddenly passes away, their devotion can dissipate, and they may view everything as ended, with the center where they once learned closing its doors. Yet, in the realm of the infinite, whether the teacher is physically present or not, nothing fundamentally changes. The teacher symbolizes the ultimate nature of the mind, so space does not hinder their compassion. When disciples realize this infinite dimension in their teacher, they will no longer cling excessively to the physical form. Disciples should understand that even though the teacher has left their physical body, within the space of the ultimate body, the teacher's blessing and vitality remain ever present. If we believe that our devotion disappears when the teacher leaves this world, that devotion is merely a form of attachment. This is akin to seeing the teacher as a companion, an ordinary person, a spouse, or a relative. In such cases, the teacher's passing becomes a true disappearance, leaving us unsure of what to do. This clearly shows that our previous feelings towards the teacher were not genuine devotion. Reflections on religious sects. From my perspective, there are two ways to avoid division and separation in the realm of faith. First, we must respect all religions. For example, I am a Buddhist, but I also hold Christianity and other religions in high regard. Moreover, respect should not be merely superficial. We should also aspire to practice according to those religions. Consequently, some people have practiced both Christianity and Buddhism simultaneously. This can indeed happen, but only to a certain extent. 346. However, as one progresses further along the spiritual path, certain differences become more apparent. Once one thoroughly understands the concept of emptiness and the principle of interdependence, dependent origination, among all phenomena, it becomes difficult to accept the idea of a God who is both a creator and exists eternally and immutably. Similarly, for those who believe in a creator God, comprehending the principle of interdependence can be challenging. At a certain level, one may only grasp what forms the foundation of their own religion and may become proficient at that level, if I may phrase it that way. Nonetheless, this does not prevent us from respecting other religious paths, although practicing them together can be challenging. 347. Additionally, in Buddhism, there is a practice known as taking refuge. Once one takes refuge in the Buddha, I do not believe it is possible to simultaneously take refuge in Jesus Christ, for instance, without encountering a dilemma. In this specific context, it might be better to regard Jesus Christ as an embodiment of a bodhisattva. Reflections for those wishing to follow the Buddhist path. I believe that the religion of our parents is often the most suitable for each of us. Moreover, it is generally not beneficial to switch from one religion to another once you have committed to a particular path. 349. Today, many people show great interest in spiritual life, especially in Buddhism, but they rarely carefully examine the path they are about to embark on. First, you must ensure that the path you choose aligns with your nature and aspirations, and then ask yourself if you have the determination to practice and what good you will gain. Therefore, it is essential to thoroughly understand the basic teachings of the religion you are considering. You will not fully grasp Buddhism before you truly step onto the path. At best, you can only grasp a few fundamental concepts. You should seriously contemplate this, and if you then decide to follow the path, everything will be more harmonious. This is the only way to deepen your commitment, and if necessary, you can make a vow to confirm your determination. 350. In Buddhism, there are various methods of meditation, such as analytical meditation, single-pointed concentration, or deep introspection into one's mind. The objects of these meditations include the perception of impermanence, non-self, suffering, love, and compassion. However, to practice meditation correctly, you must follow the guidance of an experienced and trustworthy teacher. The teacher who instructs you in Buddhism will play an important role, so you should ascertain the general qualities of a genuine teacher and then assess if your teacher possesses these qualities. Simultaneously, reflect on yourself to see if you have truly activated the determination to follow that teacher. 351. Be cautious. Do not follow the Buddhist path thoughtlessly or without any preparation, simply because it interests you. This caution will prevent you from later finding certain practices unsuitable or too difficult for you. 352. Whenever people hear about a Lama giving teachings somewhere, they often rush to listen and place their complete trust in the Lama without evaluating whether the Lama has the necessary qualities of a teacher. Later, they may discover the Lama's flaws. Initially, when they hear of a Lama residing in their area, they immediately place their trust in him without any evaluation. They attend teachings and receive instructions from him, but one day their trust turns into disillusionment. They may then loudly declare they no longer wish to hear the Lama's name due to some misconduct, such as sexual abuse of a friend. This situation may lead them to despise Buddhism altogether. This unfortunate situation arises from their lack of discernment. Therefore, it is crucial to thoroughly evaluate before placing your trust. 353. Scriptures advise thoroughly evaluating a teacher before committing to them. If you connect with a spiritual teacher without discernment and later their flaws become evident, it can feel disastrous. However, once you have taken vows or received teachings, do not let your mind be overwhelmed with negative thoughts. 354. Every person, regardless of who they are, possesses both qualities and flaws. Scriptures advise that a spiritual teacher should have more qualities than oneself. But what does this mean in practice? For instance, if someone has received oral transmission, which is rare today, about a specific teaching, even if they do not achieve profound understanding, the rituals they have received still grant them something you do not possess. Therefore, in that regard, they are superior. If you find yourself connected to an incompetent teacher, understand that through them, you have received the teachings of the Buddha. Hence, they deserve your gratitude. If you view them as a common person or worse, show contempt, it is inappropriate. Even if you regret the connection, acknowledge that they have served as your spiritual guide, and thus you should not act excessively toward them. This does not mean you must continue to receive their teachings. You have the right to sever connections. However, when you receive the Buddha's teachings through someone, it is best to develop trust in them. If you cannot, maintain a neutral attitude, neither thinking highly nor poorly of them. Do not approach the Buddhist path with the expectation of soaring to great heights, walking through walls, or foreseeing the future. The primary goal of practice is to master your mind, not to attain miraculous powers. However, as you master your mind, you may gradually develop abilities considered miraculous. Yet these are secondary to the goal of practice. If these abilities become your main focus, I believe, without a doubt, that such practice is not genuine Buddhism. It seems even organizations like the KGB and CIA have researched these abilities. In summary, exercise caution in your practice. Reflections on Buddhist practice. 357. In the beginning, we are often very enthusiastic about practice. Then we eagerly expect quick results, and finally we become neglectful or bored. This indicates a very short-sighted view. Hoping for quick results is a mistake unless one has extraordinary power, like the great yogi Milarepa. The scriptures tell us that even the Buddha had to go through 3 incalculable aeons to achieve complete enlightenment. How can we think that we will attain enlightenment after a few years of retreat? This shows that we have not fully understood the Buddha's teachings. Sometimes people think that simply ringing a little bell for a few years will make them a Buddha, but that is not serious at all. 358. Being passionate about practice is very good, but we must also understand that the Buddha accumulated merit and wisdom for 3 incalculable aeons. Therefore, we should also be aware of the immense time required for us to achieve supreme enlightenment. According to Mahayana Buddhism, the Buddha had already achieved enlightenment, with a body representing wisdom. Then, from the wisdom body, he manifested the form body, and through the form body, repeated the entire process of his enlightenment. We should ask ourselves if the Buddha's actions make sense. As we are following in his footsteps, we should remember that even in his final human life, he spent 6 years in ascetic practice. This awareness prevents us from having a short-sighted view. 359. However, we are told that the Vajrayana path can quickly help practitioners achieve Buddhahood without immediately eliminating negative emotions. This is true, but the practice is prone to mistakes and deviations. There's a story about Milarepa, where a Lama told him, "Anyone who meditates on my teachings during the day will become a Buddha during the day, and at night will become a Buddha at night. But those with favorable karma don't need to meditate at all." Milarepa, believing himself to be among the fortunate, slept all day. If we act in such contrary ways, initial enthusiasm will quickly give way to boredom. Conversely, if enthusiasm is fueled by a correct understanding of the path, it will never wane. Understanding this is crucial. 360. All religions have precepts, moral rules to follow, which aim to uphold human dignity. However, in Buddhism, some people neglect ethical aspects and focus solely on meditation, hoping to attain miraculous powers. When nothing extraordinary happens, they become disillusioned. 361. The goal of practice is not to gain miraculous powers, but to transform ourselves. The primary issue is that we are not willing to sacrifice part of our lives for practice. We know that the Buddhas required incalculable aeons, yet we give up after a few years. Hence, the Mahayana path is essential for cultivating patience. Once we thoroughly understand the Mahayana path and sincerely wish to follow the Vajrayana path, we can pursue that aspiration without considering the duration as an obstacle. With that determination, practicing Vajrayana becomes easier and we are more likely to succeed, gaining inner peace and deep insight. 362. On the other hand, if we lack a solid foundation and hastily embark on the Vajrayana path, we risk falling into the mistaken belief that becoming a Buddha is easy, thinking that one lifetime and one body are enough. We might also think that identifying with the visualized deity who we believe created the universe will grant us miraculous abilities like longevity and wealth. This ignores the primary goal of Buddhist teachings, to free ourselves from mental defilements. Instead, it focuses on secondary matters. 363. Some people do not fully trust the Buddhist teachings but are only interested in intellectual study. Others trust the teachings but only focus on intellectual understanding, achieving only theoretical knowledge. The sole purpose of Buddhist teachings is to transform us, not to provide new intellectual insights. If we receive teachings but do not apply them through meditation, the teachings are of no use. Worse, we might become bored practitioners, with some knowledge about Buddhism but lacking the genuine taste of its teachings due to insufficient personal transformation. Conversely, if we internalize the teachings, we will experience their true essence, and any boredom will vanish. Thus, knowledge and practice must go hand in hand. For those who wish to lead a contemplative life and participate in long retreats, such as the traditional 3-year retreats in Tibet, thorough preparation through preliminary courses, known as Ngondro, is essential. Without proper preparation, isolating oneself in a retreat can feel like imprisonment. During the retreat, if one merely chants mantras without genuinely focusing the mind, the retreat will be of no benefit. Before the retreat, one is an ordinary person, and after it, nothing has changed. Worse, one might become arrogant, thinking they deserve the title Lama after completing a 3-year retreat. Such retreats are useless. Conversely, with proper preparation through preliminary practices and diligent engagement in essential practices before the retreat, one will develop the ability to think, speak, and act with a distinctly disciplined manner. At the very least, we will become more disciplined individuals. Isn't that sufficient? 365. If you wish to devote yourself to humanitarian projects, that is commendable. However, as Buddhists, you must ensure that your commitment is entirely pure. Understand that if these projects are not accompanied by love and compassion, they lack the essence of Buddhist engagement. Moreover, you must rely on the Buddha. Thus, you should also set aside some time for retreats, creating opportunities to renew your refuge vows and meditate on impermanence and suffering.